Hello and welcome to the Horror Screams podcast, episode 14. I'm your host, Stephen, and we are an extension of the Horror Screams Video Vault website. I'm here today with our regular co-host, Sarah. How on earth are you doing, Sarah?
Hello, I'm very good, thank you.
Marvellous. And we're also joined as a special guest, Matt Blissett's here. Hi, Matt. How's it going?
Hi, I'm good. How are you both?
It's a
Very
good thing. Very, very good. So it's a big episode today. We've got a special episode about John Carpenter. We were going to do an episode about the Carpenters, but found out Karen had died, and then, the kind of excitement died off with her. We're going to start with a deep dive. What else can we do for something as majestic as The Thing from 1982? Pivotal part of John Carpenter's career. We'll be having a chat about that. And indeed, John's other stuff, which is not too shabby. But before the shenanigans of the John Carpenter, it's time to catch up with what we call our regular recently enjoyed slot, where we have a bit of a chinwag about what we've been up to, what we've seen or read or done to some degree. And we're in the midst of a second national lockdown, so there's a lot of time to kind of amuse yourself, I guess. Sarah, what on earth have you been up to?
Well, glad you asked that, Stephen.
Oh.
Because it's probably one of the best things to happen, like in 2020. I'm sure quite a lot of people have got hold of this, but I've recently acquired myself a copy of the new Second Sight Films release of Dawn of the Dead.
Ooh la la.
I believe you have a copy as well.
I can't stop touching it. Yes.
I know. It's probably been like the most exciting thing that's happened to us this year. And it's just so awesome. There's so many amazing stuff. I got the Blu-ray edition, not the big whopping great 4K thing, but it still comes with like a shed load of extras, 3 different versions of the film itself, some brilliant little limited edition books and essays and stuff, and one of my favourite things is a 3-disc collection of the soundtrack, a Goblins track, and then a compilation of the other tracks on the film and stuff. And it's just been so great. I've had this for about a week now, and I've watched something from it every day this week. It's been amazing.
Very cool. It's beautiful. Second Sight are a pretty small company, really, compared to even things like Arrow, and I think they're probably on the level of 88 Films in terms of being a small independent company. And as it says in the book, this is a real labour of love for them. So a massive effort to not only restore the movie in 4K and all that stuff, but also to gather together a whole bunch of new extras, which is just an embarrassment of riches. There's so much stuff in there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's going to be amazing to go through it all. And yeah, they're definitely a company to keep an eye out on, because I think I recently saw that I think the next one they want to do is Dog Soldiers or something, I believe.
Yes, Dog Soldiers is coming. Martin was delayed. Not your partner, I mean the movie.
No,
he's never delayed. That's all I've heard. I've just seen his website. Martin is coming. Actually, I'll rephrase that. Martin is going to be out soon, and that in itself is a really interesting film. And I'm presuming they'll do an equally fab job with that. You've watched the movie as it is in its restored state, haven't you?
What, of Dawn of the Dead?
Yes.
Yes, I have. Yeah, the theatrical cut is the first one I went for.
Nice. And
it
does
very
look
beautiful.
Lovely.
It does, yeah. Really clean, but it still keeps, obviously, the special effects and stuff. It's all very like 70s, 80s, but it just looks so great.
Yeah, fortunately they haven't done like a Star Wars thing where they've CGI'd the helicopter zombies who don't have such a big flat head or anything. Yeah, it's fabulous. Matt, when was the last time you saw Dawn of the Dead, 1979?
Oh, the original?
Yeah.
A couple of months ago.
Nice.
I've been revisiting a lot of genre influences for the new writing project I'm working on, which is a fantasy series, and I kind of want to do something with zombies in one of the episodes. So,
yes, that sounds awesome.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, zombies with the principle is the main character is a halfling martial artist called Ron Brandywood, and he's a bodyguard for a sorcerer, and this sorcerer sort of travels around investigating phenomena across the world.
Cool. Nice, man. Well, that's fabulous, and one of the great modern horror movies. Certainly an influence on so much of what we talk about here. What have you recently enjoyed, Matt?
I watched the remake of, I never know my pronunciation, Suspiria, yes.
Excellent.
And that's a beautiful looking film, and it does something quite wonderful with the original, which I really enjoyed for different reasons. But the remake was surprisingly nuanced. Tilda Swinton is absolutely fantastic in it.
Yes.
And she has without spoiling it, although it's been out a while, without spoiling it, she has a number of roles that she does brilliantly. I also watched Colour Out of Space.
Fab.
Which was wonderful. The Void.
Nice. That's a good movie.
And I also watched Big Trouble in Little China again recently.
Oh, we might be hearing about that later.
Oh,
maybe,
yes. Yeah,
maybe, just maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great lineup. Suspiria Remake. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It was always guaranteed to be in the love it or hate it category, but even more when it emerged as what it is. I thought it was amazing. The original is great. I mean, it's not necessarily perfect, but it is beautiful. It's got this incredible soundscape by Goblin, who of course we'll be talking about, or have been talking about. Yeah, but what an interesting job. And the setting of it in 1970s Berlin, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, you got the whole Baader Meinhof thing going on at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And a really interesting cast. And a great score by good old Tom York.
Mm.
Fabulous. Colour Out of Space. Have you seen Colour Out of Space yet, Sarah?
I have not, no.
Oh, you must catch up with it. I think it's, in fact, I know it's free on Amazon Prime now if you are indeed a Amazon Prime customer.
I am indeed.
Fabulous. Well worth seeing. Beautiful film. Richard Stanley's stuff is probably worthy of an episode in itself, although he did disappear up a mountain for a while after the experience of Island of Dr. Moreau. He has made some really interesting stuff, and Colour Out of Space is perhaps something we'll have to return to. Nice. Sarah, what else have you been enjoying?
Oh, well, it's been very kind of... I have to admit that my list isn't particularly very horrified on this occasion, because I've kind of been watching the Dawn of the Dead set and getting into the John Carpenter stuff, but there has been a few things that I've recently come across that I wanted to mention, and one of them is this really cool little animated series I discovered that's showing on E4 Adult Swim, so at 3 o'clock in the morning, called Primal. It's an animated series about a caveman who's kind of at the dawn of his evolution, and he kind of becomes really good friends with a dinosaur who's on the brink of extinction, and they kind of have this unlikely friendship, battling snakes and mammoths and apes, and there's this one really cool episode where they're battling zombie dinosaurs. There is no dialogue in it whatsoever. It's all music and just crazy action and lots of grunts and stuff like that, but you get really into it. They're only 20 minutes long, these episodes, but you get really attached, and it's such a sweet little friendship between them and stuff. It's really gruesome and really gory, but also really sweet. I love it. I think it's really
done by
great.
the same guy who did Samurai Jack, isn't it?
It is indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
And
I've seen the sketches for it, and it looks incredible.
It's really, really good. I think he also did a feature-length movie of the same characters, just called Primal Tales of Savagery. So it's the same characters, but I think they're just in a feature-length type thing. I think they're battling giant crocodiles or something. But yeah, the episodes they're just really cool, and I just got into that straight away. I want to watch everything to do with it.
Nice. How do you watch that? Through Adult Swim?
Yes. And it is also, you can buy the whole series through Prime as well.
Okay, wow.
What have you been watching, Stephen?
Oh, what have I been watching? All sorts of stuff. Yeah. Well, I watched one of the best things I've watched probably all year. In fact, I've seen two things this past month that are way up there in terms of this year's movies. One is His House, which is the Remy Weeks movie that's now on Netflix. In fact, I think it's a BBC co-production. It's Netflix is where it's premiered anyway. This is Remy Weeks' feature debut, and it's a really, really strong film. It's horrifying even without the supernatural element. It opens with basically the main character's journey on a crowded boat to Boris Johnson's England. So these are, I suppose, two of the many desperate people that turn up here every year and are greeted with a miserable panel, this dispassionate bunch of people who one of them's texting, one of them's eating, who decides their fate in England as asylum seekers. Matt Smith is in it in a kind of gently obnoxious role as the guy that shows them to their palace where they're going to be living, where there's lots of bugs and strangers piss in their garden. And it's really, really effective at showing their disorientation of being here. They've lost a child in the journey from their war zone in South Sudan to this miserable vision of 21st century Britain. But also the horror element of the supernatural kind kicks in when the wife, who is called Real, starts to believe that they have been followed by an apith, a night witch from their original village. And you gradually see manifestations of that. And indeed, it's played by regular unpleasant monster actor Javier Botet, or Botit is probably how we pronounce it in England. So I don't know quite how you say his name, but he appears in all sorts of things. He is, I believe, he's not in Quarantine. He's in a whole bunch of stuff for... he's like the equivalent of Doug Jones in Del Toro films. He turns up in all sorts of things.
Part of his ensemble.
The various monsters.
Yeah, exactly. Because he is so unusually tall. He was, if you ever saw a film called Freehold, he turns up in so many things.
Yes,
Freehold.
I've seen
He's
Freehold.
that guy.
Yeah, he's the creepy guy in the wall.
Yeah, because he's massively tall. He's very lanky,
bendy and weird. Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't just do monsters, but it seems to be he fits that. If Doug Jones is not available and needs someone like that, he's around for European horror pictures. The witch is really striking, but the thing about this movie is it's just really moving as well, because through the course of the plot, which of course I won't ruin, you realise exactly why they're so traumatized even before they arrive here, and of course the witch fits into that. It's got some beautiful visuals. It's really well done. It's not above jump scares. There's a couple. I think there's a bird scare in it. There's a few kind of more conventional scares or shocks, but so much of it is about the migrants' experience in Britain. In this case, it happens to be accompanied by an evil witch. But his house is well worth seeing, so do check it out. Another one, if I may indulge, is a film from Australia called Relic, which is possibly the best horror film I've seen this year. Incredible film from, again, I think it's a feature debuting director called Natalie Erica James. And this is a truly scary, but again, really moving piece about the monster of dementia, essentially. So it has this woman played by Emily Mortimer, whose mum hasn't been seen for a while. She's clearly in the advanced stages of dementia. Her house is full of notes reminding her to do stuff like turn off the taps, flush the toilet. As the movie goes on, these notes get increasingly moving. They start finding things that say simply, I am loved. Reminders to herself when she looks at her bed. But yeah, gradually you realise that it seems the house that she lives in, where Emily Mortimer and her own daughter come to stay, seems to be itself a manifestation of this woman's declining mind. But there's more to this. So on one surface level, it's a haunted house film, but it's also the story of this woman deteriorating to the stage where she's no longer recognisable. This has a kind of extraordinary final half an hour. It has real reminders of Cronenberg's The Fly. I don't think I've ever seen a horror film that captures the horror of watching your loved one rot away and die horribly and being unable to do anything for them. It's brilliant, really well acted. Emily Mortimer's great. It's been shown. It was shown at the online London Film Festival. I think it's now available to rent on Amazon, but I don't think you'll see a more harrowing horror movie than Relic, which, it will ruin your evening. But then that's what the genre's there for, right? Some of the time.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
House will as well, I think.
I will say another series of films I watched, because I count them as a series by the same director. Dragged Across Concrete and Assault on Cell Block, I'm going to say 9.
Oh, Brawl in Cell Block
That's the
9.
one.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have watched it, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, man? That guy, it's S. Craig Zahler, isn't it?
Yeah, he's instantly in my pantheon now. He's someone that I've bookmarked to watch whatever he's doing next.
Yeah. Yeah. They are incredible films. I was so pleased. I've always quite liked Mel Gibson, and I was so pleased that Mel Gibson has such a great role in Dragged Across Concrete, and he's so good.
Well, there's a kind of tenderness to the character as well, which makes the necessary actions of ruthlessness in the second act all the more relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so well done. This guy makes S. Craig Zahler, I guess, makes modern day B movies that we have all seen. The kind of subject matters that are in Brawl in Cell Block 9, 99. Yeah. Oh God, it's definitely called Brawl in Cell Block something.
Yeah, 99.
99.
He did Bone Tomahawk as well.
Yes.
Bone Tomahawk's incredible.
Yes.
And he gives time to these things. Like Dragged Across Concrete could have been an 80-minute film. It's actually 2.5 hours. But the important thing is, it's all about the tedium of like a stakeout, isn't it? It's all about these guys and their typical work, which is occasionally punctuated by extreme violence. So it's well worth staying the course. All three of those movies are great. He also, I don't know if you've seen it, Matt, but he also wrote Puppet Master, the Littlest Reich, which is this.
I've actually, I found that, and that's on my list to watch on your recommendation, as we discussed. So yes,
that's full tilt S. Craig Zahler given the keys to the Puppet Master franchise and filling it with loads of bad taste gore gags. And Udo Kier, who pops up in at least one of the films we just mentioned, possibly both. But he does work with these great actors in a certain stage of their life, like Don Johnson, doesn't he?
Yeah, Jennifer Carpenter.
Yes.
I think he's had Mark Blucas in both of them so far.
Yes.
He tends to do the music. There's this real auteur energy at what he does.
There is, not dissimilar to the guy that we're talking about tonight. There's a degree of that, isn't there, in terms of these very cynical, blackly comic scripts and the actors he uses. The Bone Tomahawk's got a fabulous cast, like Sid Haig, David Arquette turn up in it, obviously Kurt Russell. Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. You guys seen anything else or experienced anything else this past month?
Well, there was this one series that I watched on the off chance. Weirdly, Matt, you might have seen it. I don't know if you have, but I recently finished watching Ratched on Netflix.
No, I haven't.
You haven't seen that one yet?
Watched that yet? I've been watching Black Sails.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
piratey goodness.
That's the prequel to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, isn't it? We're focusing on her.
Yeah. It doesn't have a lot to do with that, but yeah, it does have Mildred Ratched in it. But yeah, it was weird how I came across it. I was watching Gogglebox, and they were watching it on there, and it's because it's like a typical kind of Ryan Murphy directed type thing. It has a good couple of people from American Horror Story, and it's Sarah Paulson and the lovely Finn Wittrock, and it kind of starts off with him, Finn Wittrock, being the brother murdering several priests, and then Mildred Ratched makes her way into the psychiatric hospital that he's sent to as a nurse so she can try and help him escape. But as the series goes on, you find out that it's much more than that. You find out the whole backstory of how they were orphaned and went through the care system and stuff in the very like early 40s, 50s kind of a time, and how it led them to do what they did and why they've done what they've done, and discovering themselves and sexuality and all sorts of stuff. And I was just kind of taken aback by it because I wasn't expecting it to be quite that in depth, and it really got me. But yeah, I thought that was fantastic. That was a really, really good series. It didn't end quite as emotionally as I'd hoped it would. It's kind of set itself up for the second season, which might not be as good, but that first series was definitely one to check out.
Yeah, I will catch up on that, absolutely.
Yeah, that looks really cool.
Also because Sarah Paulson's a magnetic actress as well.
She's fantastic. She was brilliant. And so is Finn Wittrock. He's great. And very nice to look at. I've
forgotten who Finn Wittrock is. Who is he again? Just remind me. I know.
Well, you want to know who he played in some of the American Horror Stories?
He's got really symmetrical face. I'll say that for him.
He was. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look up Freak Show. I can't remember the name of him because he was the best character in that.
Ah. I know the name for sure. No,
he's part of his ensemble, isn't he, now?
Yeah, he's in it quite a lot. Not as much as Evan Peters. He's not Evan Peters, he's the other one.
Okay, I think... It's been a while. I do want to watch Ratched, though. That looks right up my street. Is it quite camp?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. That's one box tick. Yeah, I like the idea of Ratched. I'm a big fan of Cuckoo's Nest, but I'm interested in what Ryan Murphy's done with it, or done with the character, rather. Very cool. I started watching a show called Slasher on Netflix, which I'm not sure if I can make it through. I have a real hard time committing to TV series because there's so many of them, and I feel under pressure that I should be watching all of them. So I just thought I'd pick the one that no one's watching, which is Slasher. And I'm not sure about it. It seems to me to be quite a dull 45 minutes of soapish, slasherish plot, and then every episode there'll be about 2 minutes of one outrageous murder. So somebody gets bisected by a chainsaw in the first episode, which tricks you into thinking you want to stick around for the rest of them because you know there's going to be some spectacular disembowelment in episode 2. So yeah, not sure about that one. But you never know. I'm not sure if I need to see a slasher movie spread out over 8 hours. That's mainly what it comes down to. A bit like when they did the From Dusk Till Dawn TV series, which made me want to hurt myself. I
never watched that.
Yeah, and the Mist TV series. It's excruciating things.
It's not good when they do that.
That it exists upsets me.
Yeah.
That's enough. There was a Scream TV series which I got some way through, and which wasn't, it wasn't as excruciating as The Mist, but it was still a bit rubbish.
The question side of it is like you don't even finish something. You just like, I'm gonna go boil the kettle and watch that instead. I know we're sending in up for 4 episodes, but life's really too short. So,
well, that's just it, isn't it? And back in the day, of course, things were quite different. Like now, we have 400 really good shows, and you just got to find the one that you genuinely commit to. But back in the 80s, I remember watching 3 whole seasons of Friday the 13th, the TV series, which had nothing to do with the movies, which was just about a haunted, an antique shop that sold cursed goods. And it was very repetitive. Every week, someone would come in, I'll buy that unusual pen, and it would be cursed and bad stuff would go down. And you'd realise that, hang on a minute, this is just like last week's. At this time, it's
a pen
form.
rather than a toilet. Yeah.
Like that Rick and Morty episode where Satan opens the shop up.
This is the same thing. Yeah. But of course, back in 1987, there wasn't really any other horror show on. Tales from the Crypt hadn't happened yet. The good stuff from the 70s had passed by, so it was slim pickings, really.
When was Tales from the Dark Side, though?
Oh, that was actually, that was around mid-80s. I think it started in 85, and that had some great episodes. There's what's that great Clive Barker short story? Oh, there's an interesting adaptation of that because it's such a weird story. I have to try and think of that. But senility has crept in, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, it was a bit of a dry old time compared to now, where it's like, I just don't know. So I probably will just end up watching Ratched because that seems a sensible choice.
Yeah, there's just so much to choose from, and like you say, now you can, watch a couple of episodes and go, that isn't going to work. Move on to the next thing.
That's true, yeah. Even horror shows, if you just limited yourself to horror or sort of vaguely horror shows, you'd have a lot of choice because there's a lot of good buzz around a show that's been on there for a while called Marianne, the French show, which apparently is really good and really creepy. I just don't know where to start. But as soon as I find something that's as good as Hannibal, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to beat. We need to do something on that. We need to do an episode purely on the Hannibal TV series.
I think that's what we could actually do. This is just obviously speculating about episodes during an episode, but we could actually do an all Hannibal episode with the movies as well.
Yeah, I'm in.
Let's
Yay!
do that. Let's commit to that. I'm going to write that down in pen.
I'm absolutely in for that because I can wax lyrical about the books as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Let's put aside a good 3 or 4 hours on that one.
Yes.
Yeah. They're so good. Oh, and the TVs, that would give me an excuse to rewatch the TV series and not worry about new ones. Awesome.
Yes. Okay, right, that's that sorted.
Done. Good night. Thank you. Yeah. And finally, before we move on to The Thing, a couple of other things really, or maybe just one. The Mortuary Collection is something that I know
Yes.
you and Sarah have watched. I don't know if you've watched the Mortuary Collection, Matt.
Is that the one with Clancy Brown in the lead?
It
I've
is,
seen
yes.
it advertised, but I haven't had a chance to watch it as yet.
You have
It's
to
lovely.
watch it.
It's really
brilliant.
lovely. Yeah. I heard an interview with Clancy Brown on Mick Garris's Postmortem, which is a really good podcast if you get a chance. He has some good guests. And Clancy Brown's really charming. He likes horror movies, really humble. He likes kind of old Universal horror movies and having a good chin wag about the Mortuary Collection. And it's a really good. There's so many Duff horror anthologies that come out these days.
So many.
A lot of them are just like short films that were somewhere else and someone found and whacked them into a film and called it The Horror Vault or something. But this is a really good one where the stories work well together. The wraparound is really good. As you said, Clancy Brown is the morgue attendant who, a bit like John Carpenter in Body Bags, is basically doing a tour of his guests, the stiffs and the backstories behind them. And the young woman that's come along applying for the job is interested, and she's kind of acting as an audience surrogate, really commenting on the stories as they unfold. This one's a bit shit. This one's not got enough depth or enough scares, but it works really well. And the 4 stories that unfold are all good. Some of them are actually quite shocking. There's some great practical gore effects. Some of them really do make you go, "Oh, God, blimey, Christ!" And it has an awesome twist or two at the very end as well. It's really well done, isn't it?
It is so well done. It flows so well as well. The first story is actually quite a short little one, isn't it? Which then goes into the more gory one, and then your third one just gets you right in the feels. That's actually quite destroying, that one.
Yes,
So
I know
sad.
which one. Yes, it is.
And then the last story, the first 3 stories are told by the mortician, and then the last story is kind of the girl. Because you actually then, there's a bit of a twist going on. You kind of find out she's not quite what she seems. So you then get her story at the end. Yeah. Which I think was actually released as a standalone movie on its own, wasn't it? Called The Babysitter Murders or something?
Yes.
I think I've got it written down.
The director started out with shorts, and that's one of his really good shorts, actually. And this is an expansion of that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's really good. That's short, actually, as well worth seeing on its own. The Mortuary Collection, highly recommended. Clancy Brown's great.
He's brilliant.
He is.
Yeah, he needs to do loads more stuff like that. I love him.
I hadn't seen him for a while, but obviously the stuff he's done is fabulous, including playing the monster in The Bride. Do you ever watch the version of Bride of Frankenstein starring Sting?
No.
The Sting. He was the Kurgan.
Of course, Highlander. Yeah, fabulous. And Shawshank. He's just a great director. Another horror anthology that Shudder have got, Mortuary Collection is on Shudder, is Scare Me, which is also quite interesting. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, but it's somewhere between a horror anthology and improv night on Halloween. It's got Aya Cash from The Boys, and Josh Rubin directed it and stars in it as well. And depending on your tolerance for a movie with just mostly 2 people essentially doing an improv night, but in a cabin in the woods telling horror stories, which they act out rather than us seeing them being acted out in a conventional horror movie fashion, it is good. I mean, it is funny. It's just perhaps a little overstretched. But Scare Me is interesting, especially if you like Aya Cash and Josh Rubin, who give it their everything, and there's even a musical number in it. For those that like that kind of thing. About dead kids, I should add.
Cool.
Wonderful. So that probably wraps up. I was going to mention I saw the 4K restoration of Lucio Fulci's The New York Ripper as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which probably warrants an episode on its own and has long been controversial in this country. Our country triumphs again in the censorship fashion. This was the movie that in the 80s not only was it banned, but the guy in charge of the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, ordered all copies to be shipped out of the country in case it poisoned the minds of people. In case the black market version started taking over.
Scarfolk, isn't it?
It's Scarfolk come flesh. This is where Scarfolk comes from. Yeah, absolutely. That's how. I mean, it is very nasty, as you'd probably possibly expect from a film called The New York Ripper by Lucio Fulci. But when you look at it now, as much as it's been accused of being misogynistic 1,100 times, it's actually just a really misanthropic film. It hates everybody. It doesn't just hate women. It's a miserable, nasty film where no one's a good guy. The cop in it, this white man, is an awful human being. The women are marginally more sympathetic, but they all get mutilated or, get a broken bottle shoved in their genitals. It's a relentless exercise, but it's also really, really good. And the new 4K restoration makes it look strangely beautiful. And it's set in New York in the 80s. It was shot in New York in the 80s, so you've got all these shots of 42nd Street cinemas showing 1980s horror films on the marquee. So it's a great kind of portrait of that place and time set against this savage answer from Italy to America's slasher films. So like, well, if you want all of that, here it is times 10.
Nice.
So, yeah. So again, it's not necessarily good fun for everyone, but it is a great Lucio Fulci film if you're into his stuff. You really should like New York Ripper. It's actually around in the UK now, but cut by about 10 seconds. Because, of course, those 10 seconds make all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, that's enough for recently seen. That was a good bunch of films, actually. So do check them out. And it's time, I think, to move on to the main event, which is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. We've done it before, actually. I mean, we spoke about The Shining not long ago and Psycho not long ago. So this is another milestone of horror's history, really. And like The Shining, even more than The Shining, this movie wasn't loved when it came out. And unlike The Shining, it wasn't a hit either. The week it was released in June 1982 in America, it was number 8 at the US box office, while E.T. was number 1 for the third week. And another film called Blade Runner also really disappointed in terms of critical reviews and also people actually going to see it. So it was savagely received in 1982, but quickly, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, I was one of the many people that rediscovered it, or actually discovered it on VHS. Through VHS years, it became the film that you would talk about the next day. Really? The husky exploded?
Yes.
And you would pause. What is that? Is that a flower?
Yeah.
And it became this thing. It became a massive hit. And now there's whole books about it. Jez Connolly's written a great book about it. Ann Bilson's written a great critical study about it. There's been a prequel on the Silver Screen comic books. A whole story from the perspective of The Thing. And it's rightly become known as a horror classic. This was John Carpenter's first studio film, coming off the back of the independently made Escape from New York and his other stuff that we'll talk about. And I suppose it's interesting to remember that, unlike someone like Wes Craven, John Carpenter didn't have a big hit every decade. He had big flops like this, Big Trouble and Little China. Only a few of his films hit well, but now most of them are at least kind of cult loves, for a lot of people. With you too, I mean, can you both remember when you first saw The Thing?
Yes, it was, for me, I went through a phase with my best friend Carl Audley of going to Magdalen Video in Galston every weekend and working our way through their VHS horror section.
Nice.
So once you go through the Friday, the thrill of watching all of the Friday the 13th movies back to back, you then start to either quit or become a bit more refined. So we found The Thing then, and it just, much, you mentioned, Stephen, much like with The Shining, to me it was one of those films that I got instantly. And one of the things I think about as I'll say grow in wisdom, but I mean get older, is thinking about how things were before the internet, where you had to search things out.
Yeah.
Like there was a little bit of I wouldn't say gatekeeping in a negative sense, but you had to look for the good stuff.
Yeah.
and The Thing was one of the, if you'd seen The Thing, you recognised it with other people, and I thought it was. I mean, it's still a wonderful film, and it was pleasant to come back to it and still appreciate it for what it was, but also see where I think it's even more refined.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you, Sarah, do you remember when you first saw it?
I think I saw it kind of later on. It was definitely early 90s, something like that, mid 90s, I reckon. It would have been on VHS and more than likely with my brother. But like you say, it's definitely one that you would go, to school and talk to your mates about the day after. And I was just remember watching it and thinking, oh my God, it was not exactly what I was expecting. I think I'd seen The Fog before that, so I was expecting it to be kind of like that. So as soon as the dog goes in and starts mutating and stuff, you're like, what? That's just blew my tiny little mind, because you're expecting it to be more kind of like, not really, kind of creeping in the background. You wouldn't really see it, but this is like so in your face.
It is.
And the deformed bodies that they find at the Norwegian's base and stuff. It's just stuff that I would constantly like pause and like get up really close to the TV and go, what? Like you say, what is that? What? Two heads melded together? Is that what that is? And, and just being like absolutely fascinated by it. And I still am. I revisit it quite a lot. Yeah. And every single time I still have to pause the changes just to watch it. Like, just see it unfolding. I think it's just ingenious.
It's aged incredibly well, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
It has.
But the way that it's lit as well is just absolutely exquisite.
It's beautifully shot, isn't it? It's absolutely beautiful. And it's mad to think that this, because it is an insane film, and it's got all these extraordinary moments, surrealistic gore effects on a massive scale, that this was a mainstream film. As we said, released when E.T. was fresh in the cinema by the same studio. It's kind of astonishing. I like the fact that I've always kind of known this, I suppose, but I thought about it most this way. I like the fact that a lot of the characters in the film essentially are the audience commentating on it, like it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is. There's a man in there, and of course, you've got to be fucking kidding. All these things are essentially our reactions, and even on repeat viewings, it's, as you said, it still holds up. I still am never quite sure at which point in the blood test sequence it all goes to hell. I always forget like who it is and at what stage the thing goes.
It's the scream, isn't it?
Yeah.
Elevates that scene, like it immediately focuses your attention on the moment. It's
yeah, absolutely.
Really clever.
It's just so good.
Yeah, even like from the start, the helicopter's chasing the dog, and you're instantly like, well, why are they chasing the dog? There's nothing wrong with the dog. The dog's fine. It's just a dog. And there's like jumping up at them, being all friendly. And then as soon as they let it into the cage with the other dogs, everything just changes, and you're just like, hang on a minute.
Yeah, that first section is really good, because the film starts and ends pretty quiet, doesn't it? It's this, at the start, it's this very sparse white on black opening titles. You get the optical effect of the spaceship and the title burning itself into the screen, which is a nice kind of homage to the way the title appears in the 1951 version. But the opening is quiet, and it's got that eerie beat of the Ennio Morricone score. I quite like that the studio didn't let John Carpenter do the score for this, as he had for his independently made films, but they got Ennio Morricone in to do the John Carpenter style score, which I thought was quite good. This minimalist heartbeat that's incredibly eerie. It's fabulous. I really like the opening. I really like the the chess wizard game that Kurt Russell is playing.
That dates it so much, though, doesn't it?
That would be the closest thing to a female presence in the film.
Yes.
Yes,
that
it is
true, because there is no other women in that whatsoever. It's all blokes.
And he gets angry with it. The only female character, he gets angry with it and pours J and B straight into it. It's just the. I also like the other dated technology aspect of it is the computer representation of the assimilation of the thing, which is kind of like a very downbeat Pac-Man. 27,000 hours from first. I mean, it's just fabulous from the very beginning. I think, it's interesting. There's those very creepy. There's a lot going on in the first half an hour. This movie isn't big. It doesn't seem to be big on character development, but at the same time, you you very cleverly get a grasp of who these people are, and the fact that, like in Alien, where they're all bored, and like in John Carpenter's Dark Star, been there for a long time, you get the sense of who these men are. You don't know that much about them, but at the same time, you know, I mean, it helps, I suppose, that he's cast quite distinctive actors like Wilford Brimley and Richard Mercer, all got a great presence on screen. But you still feel like you know them, don't you?
Absolutely.
It's interesting that you mention Alien, because they occupy similar mental real estate for me, in terms that you're trapping the multiple protagonists in an isolated location with the monster,
and no one knows who's infected, who's not.
Yeah, you then create that sort of, like, much like any zombie movie. The Thing is almost incidental to a point, because it's the paranoia and the conflict and the lack of trust between them.
Yeah.
Which I think it might well have been a deliberate choice that it is just a group of men.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it. Certainly, I can't say, because I know the lead in the prequel is what's her name? The actress.
Oh, it's Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the prequel. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that changes the dynamic at all, but I find it similar to Alien, and it's also interesting how often you get horror films set at work.
Yeah,
because it is such if you think about it objectively, you spend large chunks of your day, your life, with people who start off as strangers, and then you develop relationships with them as complex as whatever other relationships you have.
Yeah, absolutely. You really get that here, don't you?
Yeah.
In a very kind of pithy kind of way. It doesn't have to spend time with backstory. It just captures that slight sense of boredom. Some of them get on, some of them don't. There's tensions even before this, you sense anyway. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the original short story, this is technically a remake, but it is more correctly an adaptation of Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, which is this incredible pre-World War II novella, which is an all-male cast and does have Blair and Macready and a similar group dynamic to the John Carpenter version. The 1951 version, A Thing from Another World, where the monster isn't an imitating, shape-shifting alien, but a more conventional Frankenstein monster-style 7-foot intellectual carrot is what it's called in that movie, which essentially it is. But the Howard Hawks version from 1951 does have a really strong, smart, funny female lead with an all-male cast, so that's quite an interesting difference to the film that Carpenter clearly loved, and which is also a containment movie like this and like a lot of Carpenter's films generally. But yeah, the dynamic works really well. And the build-up is so eerie. There's a great shot, which I hadn't really noticed because your mind gets taken over by all the massive set pieces, but there's such a creepy, quiet shot of the husky just wandering into that room, and you just see the character's shadow on the wall as it walks in and it goes to black. It's a brilliant build-up. And the Norwegian camp with the image of the corpse with the kind of tendrils of frozen blood from its veins, which is something that they do recreate in the prequel, or kind of obviously show where that emerged from. Yeah, just a great thing. I watched a documentary with Carpenter where he said that he was a huge fan of the Howard Hawks film, a huge fan of the novel, but didn't want a guy in a suit because even though, as you said, there's a lot of comparisons to Alien, Alien's monster ultimately, when it's grown up, is still a man in a very good suit. So I like the fact that half an hour into this, you realise that, Christ, there's not going to be a man seeing this. What on earth is this? What am I seeing? And it is, and I checked the time, it's half an hour when the first big total mayhem happens. So you've got half an hour of men in close quarters, being cold, a bit bored, finding each other's dirty pants in the kitchen bin, playing cards and watching old tapes of game shows and stuff. And then you've got the first big, gory, monstrous set piece, which is still stunning, isn't it? That's an incredible thing. Yeah. I mean, what's your favourite? I mean, there's a lot of set pieces in this, and they are all off the rewind it and pause it in crappy old 1980s VHS worthiness, and they're all playground talking points. What's your favourite of all the big, obvious set pieces in the thing, Sarah?
Oh, what do you mean, like with the gore transformations and stuff, or just the sets in general?
Yeah, no, the big sequences. Yeah, the big.
Well, yeah, it has to be definitely the first bit when the dog's face splits into 4 different bits, and then the whole bit of trying to figure out which bit is dog and which bit is kind of alien, and then I suppose you've got the other bits of I can't remember which character it is. I think it might be Clark. Is it Clark's head that turns into a kind of spider?
Yeah,
that was seriously gross, because he's just lying on the table and his head just kind of he's just burning everything, isn't he, as he goes along, and the head just kind of drops off the table and crawls under the desk. Yeah, that's something that you don't forget very quickly.
And I think it's
another bit that it's nothing necessarily to do with the thing, but is quite unnerving, is when Blair goes nuts and starts busting everything up.
He loses it.
That's quite disturbing. Yeah, he does lose it. And then he's just sitting, they lock him in the shed or whatever it is, don't they? And the next time they go and visit him, he's like fashioning himself a little noose and it's just hanging there in front of him.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff's kind of eerie as well. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That sequence you mentioned is great, isn't it? Because it's at the time where slasher movies were big and things like that, and even Alien, where the big shocking set pieces happens halfway through, and it's fairly short. But in The Thing, the sequence which starts with the defibrillator, it just keeps on going. It just keeps on going, and he's a spider. You've got to be fucking kidding! It's this very extended. Well, you thought we'd top that earlier, but now it keeps on going.
It's more, yes. Yeah, you're not expecting his hands to just disappear into that guy's chest at all to start off with, are you? And then it just gets worse from there. His hands get ripped off, and it's crazy. And you feel for the characters. Do you have a favourite character in it? Because mine has to be Windows.
Windows is great.
I love Windows. I think I would be Windows.
I don't know if I have a favourite. They're all really fun to be around, actually, and it's a shame because you start to get to know them, and then at least one of them's going to die at any point. I like Palmer. Palmer's really fun. I like Keith David, of course, is fabulous. Who's the naysayer? But Palmer is the one that's ranting about conspiracies and the government knowing all about it, isn't he? He's that guy, which I quite like. What about you, Matt? What's your character of choice?
Just the end sequence in one of the things I like about the screenplay and how Carpenter interprets it is that it's such a lovely progression in that you obviously have the initial infection and corruption with the dogs, and then it spreads and creates paranoia between the group. And then in that last sequence where it's become this... One of the things that Carpenter's done very well is that he's done Lovecraftian horror with the serial numbers filed off. And in that last sequence where the corruption that the parasite creates with its assimilation even crumbles the station around them so that there's absolutely nothing left. Like it's so effective a parasite that it completely absorbs and destroys everything around it. Its desire to grow. Like it's not evil. It's just doing what it needs to do and live, as we all do. But because we identify with this group of guys, because there's pants in the bin and they're drinking to pass the time, you come to care for them. So it's quite a nuance. So that final sequence where it just completely rips everything apart is so shocking and cathartic because you've really earned the tension, and you get some real slapstick moments as you were describing, Sarah, with the when the head falls off and the legs emerge from it. But it becomes at the point where the hilarity becomes almost like a scream. It's beautifully done.
You do, and you also get the kiss-off lines, don't you? Like Kurt Russell shouting, "Well, yeah, fuck you too," to the monster. Yeah, absolutely. You get a big finale of explosions. You get the one-liners, which would, in the 80s, become everything in action and horror films, of course. And Kurt Russell's part of that from Escape from New York. But you get this. It's a lovely last scene, isn't it? It's one of the great last scenes, and again, it's impressive. He got such a downbeat ending into such a mainstream, big-budget film where it's just, well, let's just wait here for a while and see what happens.
See what happens. Yeah, they either die or they become one of the things.
And the thing gets out. Yeah, absolutely. And it's after all the distrust, and it's after all the really noisy mayhem that we've had every few minutes. It's such an eerie, small scene, but a massive one at the same time.
Interestingly enough, the short story answers that question.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the short story is really, really cool. What's the outcome of the short story? I can't remember it.
Well, it's. I would like to talk about it at length, but I'm conscious Sarah's not read it, and
I've not read it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I
don't want it to be ruined.
Yeah, I want her to have the experience of reading that short story. We'll have to make sure we mention the name of the author so anyone listening can pick up on it, because it is just wonderful.
Yes. I've forgotten the author. It's Peter
Gates.
Peter Watts. I think it's Peter Watts. The Things.
Yes.
Peter Watts. Yes. This is the story from the point of view of The Thing, which was written not massively long ago, was it? 10, 20 years?
2011.
Okay. So about a decade ago. Yeah, that's well worth checking out.
It won the Shirley Jackson Award in 2010, which is the real high-end science fiction and horror awards in the genre.
Yeah, absolutely. Check it out.
I really love the fact that so much has come out of this one film. You know, like you say, you've got short stories from the point of view of The Thing. There's been all sorts of people's interpretations of it and stuff. I mean, there's even been songs. There's a really great song by Municipal Waste, a really awesome like thrash metal band that have done they've done a whole album on like zombies and monsters, and one of their tracks is completely dedicated to The Thing. It's a really brilliant song. But it's just great that, you know, so much has come out of this one film.
It is, and it's been quoted so many times as well, isn't it? There's been so many versions of the blood test sequence, including The Faculty, which the whole thing is based on The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And the original novella is well worth a read as well, even though it's a million years old, 1938, I think. That's such it is essentially Carpenter's film from that time, and it preceded things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Puppet Masters. It was such an influential piece of fiction from a guy that didn't really do a huge amount afterwards, even though he was quite young at the time, but really captures the smells of sweat and everything at the outpost, and the paranoia and the sound of the wind and the Geiger counter clucking away and all that stuff. That is such an important part of the soundtrack of this. It's a great Kurt Russell role as well, isn't it? Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Watching this, it was only like a year after Escape from New York, and he seems to have aged about 15 years already just because of the beard. But he's typically good without seeming to do very much in this. He had some interestingly very different roles between his Carpenter films. And he's great in this. And this was Keith David's first film.
Was it?
Yeah. I watched an interview with him, and he was thrilled to get it because it was his big thing. You know?
That's a fantastic star. I think that Kurt Russell and John Carpenter go together so well.
Yeah.
I mean, Kurt Russell, in terms of his body of work's got some fantastic... he elevates a lot of genre movies. He's one of the few actors, I think, who manages to elevate Paul Thomas Anderson, which is testament to how good he is, because... most of his stuff is the Resident Evil movies, and I think his next one is Monster Hunter. So he's not, high art, but Soldier was absolutely fantastic, and he's there's a reason why in my list of Carpenter movies, Kurt Russell and him crop up again for one particular film, because they just work so well together.
Yeah, it seems to be, if Kurt Russell's not in one of John Carpenter's films, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel quite right. There's always something missing. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. They just work well together. It's like I'd say a modern equivalent is Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Or Christopher. Well, again, Leonardo DiCaprio and Christopher Nolan. Although Tom Hardy's more of a regular with Christopher Nolan, DiCaprio is.
Yeah. It's John Carpenter was very loyal. He does return to the same people, but that partnership was the big one, wasn't it? And it's a shame, really, because it appears at certain times Carpenter couldn't really even get arrested at a certain point, but when he had a few flops, and he went back to independent filmmaking straight after Big Trouble in Little China. Otherwise, presumably, they would have worked together more, especially if Escape from LA had actually done well. It's an interesting, maybe alternate timeline if things had been a little different. It holds up so well. Any other observations about The Thing, guys?
Well,
nice.
If you haven't seen it, you should. It is a classic that I think the reason that it didn't get a good reception initially was I think it was a horror film that was ahead of its time.
For sure.
Even though it was rooted in something, as you said, that it was 1938, it still tapped into something quite primal in terms of what do you do when you're trapped somewhere with the monster and you can't run away. And particularly as well that the Carpenter version feeds on that fear of amplified paranoia in a closed location.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was ahead of its time because as the decade went on, it was AIDS paranoia. When we watch it this year, watching a film about your neighbour being an enemy and having to eat out of cans and prepare your own needles, it's very much something that you can adapt to any time, really, isn't it?
And I think as well, one of the elements is that it's got what the Carpenter has, and it's amplified quite well here, is that he does blue collar horror really well. Like we're here in the UK, we'd call it working class horror.
Yeah,
he's not dealing with people with mansions and who holiday in the Hamptons. He's dealing with people who go to a bar after work and horrible things that happen to them. So he taps into that same kind of Americana horror that Stephen King does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, after Big Trouble, he makes 2 movies in a row, Prince of Darkness and They Live, where the homeless community is a big part of it.
Yes.
I don't know any other genre director that's done that, really. And it's such a commentary, isn't it, on their fate, their plight in modern day LA, both of those movies. Yeah, absolutely. And that becomes a part of the lighter stuff too, like Big Trouble. Yeah, it's all there. I mean, it's that rare remake or second adaptation that turned out to be the best one of the lot, even though the 50s thing is still a really great monster movie and it does have that same kind of tense containment scenario. Absolutely, you should watch it now. It's crazy if you've not already watched it. But the good news is it's one of those 1982 films that hasn't aged a day. And in fact, as we've said, probably holds up better than ever. It's unlikely that a major studio would make this movie in the way it is now. Of course, it would be not practical effects. Apparently, I was reading, or I heard somewhere that Rob Bottin, who did the effect sequence, the effects in the movie, worked for a whole year with no day off, 7 days, day and night, and essentially did himself a mischief in the process and had some kind of breakdown. As you'd imagine, spending all that time with like husky puppets and giant eyeballs and tendrils at the hands.
Yeah, creating more and more warped people. Yeah, I suppose that would probably send you a little bit crackers.
Yeah, day at work, darling. I made a dog's face.
Yeah, I mean, it's split into 4, and then this human hand came out, and then this guy's head fell off, and his legs came out of his ears. Yeah. Just an average day.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't eat your packed lunch, darling.
The same old, same old. And it is that. I mean, this was the revolution of effects. The 80s, it seemed to kind of go along. It went up and up and up. And then by the time you get to 1990, Nightbreed is pretty much, which I really like, by the way, is pretty much the end of it, because soon after that, CGI starts to be introduced and it shifts quite quickly, it seems. But this is probably the ultimate in all of that. There's some great effects to come, and there were some great effects before, but I don't think that the werewolf transformations, maybe an American Werewolf, which was just before this, and The Howling, probably they're on a similar level.
Yeah.
But anything after it, even the great stuff, I don't think could compare, just in sheer volume, but perhaps in just the surreal madness of this guy, clearly, like we said, having no day off in a year, and eventually going home to his wife with husky guts on his face. Which is because they are like sculptures, aren't they? Like surrealist sculptures. Like madman's been let loose at Universal Studios. Everything about it is really grim. The blood test sequence is really uncomfortable, not necessarily because of the effects that happen at the end of it, but the build-up is so tense. Even the close-ups of cutting the fingers is something that makes me cringe. The whole thing puts you on edge. Absolutely brilliant. And there was I saw a deleted scene where there's some stop-motion animation of the Blair monster that they didn't use at the end, which is probably the right thing, although I quite like that too. So I quite like that they were dabbling in that kind of outmoded practical effects at the time. But yeah, The Thing holds up for sure from those early VHS days. It would turn up on TV randomly in the 80s as well. So I think I must have seen it loads of times, but it still feels fresh even now, which says a lot about the movie, really.
Like again, there used to be that element of random, unexpected genre pleasures. Like where you just randomly find a film that you hadn't seen before, and you couldn't pause it. You either had to sit and commit to it, or not watch it. And I'm not complaining about the instant access of everything, but there is something, and it might just be pure nostalgia, but there is something about curation in terms of where we get our culture from.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine turning the TV on in the 80s and just tuning into the defibrillator scene. What after Coronation Street or something. It's just, it's kind of incredible. And there were all these things that would turn up in the middle of the night that you'd accidentally stumble on. There's one with the electrocuting cockroaches that used to be, I think ITV for a time only had about 4 films that they showed on repeat. And this was even before ITV2, where they just show Shaun of the Dead every Tuesday. But they used to show, they had horror seasons where it seemed that almost every film would be Bug, which is this 70s film about cockroaches that come out of the earth after an earthquake. And it's really gruesome. They kill a cat. They burn up people when they burrow into their ears and nostrils and things like that. And it's really gruesome. And it would just seem that you turn on TV at 1 a.m. and there was pretty much a 50% guarantee Bug would be showing at one of those really gory bits. It was like some kind of horrible recurring nightmare that you can never wake up from. Oh, Bug's on TV. Oh, God. Crosses over into reality. Them sort of days. But, of course, now it's available in these beautiful DVD and Blu-ray transfers. So, as Matt said, it's a great-looking film, which not all of us were lucky enough to see at the cinema, so at least you get to see it in these great presentations. What we're going to do is we're going to ramp through John Carpenter's other films via our own countdowns of our favourites, excluding The Thing. So now's the chance. If you've got anything else you want to say about The Thing and why you love it, now's your chance before we move on. Anything else, guys?
No, I think I've made my genuine enthusiasm for it quite clear.
Oh yeah, it's just a tremendous it's a milestone. I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to go through his other movies, and we're going to start with our countdowns. I mean, The Thing is a very, very John Carpenter-y movie. Everything from the question mark ending and the score, even though it's not by him, his name above the title, of course. I always quite liked that. When I was growing up, I became aware of directors. And I think the first 2 that I actually knew, where I found out what a director actually did, was Alfred Hitchcock and John Carpenter. And that's partly because you couldn't miss that it was by them because their names are all over the posters. John Carpenter's blah de blah, which you don't get with Brent Ratner's Red Dragon. That never happened, and Hitchcock, of course. And you get to know, in John Carpenter's case, the very distinctive style. You could tune into any of his films, especially from the 80s, and spend 2 minutes and immediately know it's a John Carpenter film. But yeah, what we're going to do is go through. So if we start with Matt, I believe you've actually greedily got a top 10 John Carpenter films, which is, of course, flouting the top 5 rules, but we'll make an exception as it's John Carpenter. So do you want to take us through the lower half of your top 10?
Halloween 2.
Halloween 2 is at number 10?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. Why Halloween 2?
For one scene, it's where he stood, and I distinctly remember watching it when I was young and being disturbed by it, where he stands in the maternity ward in front of all of the babies, and he does nothing but watch them. And it's so terrifying in its simplicity, because part of me was afraid he was going to start killing the babies, but also part of me was wondering, how are they going to pull this off?
Yeah.
And there's something inherently creepy about hospitals that Carpenter really exploits. Like, it's quite a mechanical film, but it works really, really well. And it stayed with me in that it's a really disturbing film that, but I don't necessarily enjoy the Rob Zombie ones as much as what David Gordon Green's doing now, but Zombie captured the way that they're actually meant to disturb you, that Myers is not someone to be admired or adored by any degree.
Yeah, that's a really good scene, isn't it? Yeah, because I have mixed feelings about Halloween 2, but probably the fact that he does just hang around and watch is why he's so chilling in those early films, whereas in the later films, the Rob Zombie films, he probably would have bludgeoned them to death. Yeah. Because he is a bludgeoner in those later films. I mean, he stamps a guy's head. Even in the 2018 version, he stamps a guy's head to a pulp, which doesn't exactly seem like the Michael Myers from those first 2 movies, where he, most of the time in Halloween and Halloween 2, he's just enjoying scaring people, popping out behind trees. There, He's patiently waiting. Even Donald Pleasence says he doesn't. He's patiently waiting for all this time. He's waited for 20 years, so he's not in a hurry now. I mean, he's hanging around at the hospital. He's watching the girls and the teenagers from afar, and the one thing I hate about Halloween 2 is it brought the whole soap opera thing, the whole post Empire Strikes Back thing about it's her brother. Oh yeah, okay, didn't see that one coming. Which John Carpenter himself admitted he hated, but wrote because he had no other ideas. But otherwise, yeah, it's a cool. There's a few hospital slashers, but that one does it quite well. And I hadn't thought about the maternity ward thing for a while. That is a genuinely interesting, creepy scene. At the time when he was still this blank figure that just relished the chance of frightening people as much as killing them. Possibly more, probably more, in fact. Cool choice, man. There's other good things about it, isn't there, Halloween 2? It's not terrible by any means.
There's also the really horrible death by sauna in it.
Oh, yeah, that goes on for a while. Yeah, that's genuinely unpleasant.
If you're watching it, you kind of think, come on, is it over yet?
It's still being dunked.
You've made your point now, can we move on?
Another cut to the temperature gauge going up.
Yeah.
And it's also got one of those, why doesn't this happen more in horror movies bits where the guy slips in the pool of blood and knocks himself out when he's meant to be coming to the rescue, And they steal that in Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear, where I forgot which character, but somebody does the same thing in there. And there's that Halloween 2 moment. Excellent. That's cool. And it's got that shot. There's a weird random moment in Halloween 2, which of course deserves attention that we're giving it now, where you see the kid that's coming to hospital in this strangely deserted hospital, where he's bleeding from the mouth because he has fallen victim to the old razor blades in the apples, which is quite gruesome and random. Doesn't need to be there, but you're like, oh, okay.
He is just kind of wandering around, isn't he? He's not really anything to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. He's totally irrelevant to everything else. It's an interesting film. I think the fact that it carries over on the same night as the original means you do have a sense of Haddonfield having been through something really scary, and there's a lynch mob already. They're attacking the Myers house. So I think it's got more going on than some of the blandness of it maybe takes it away, but it's more going on than most of the sequels that followed. Apart from Halloween 3, which is brilliant. Okay, Matt, number 9. It's all about you at the moment, so number 9.
They Live.
They Live.
It's got a really dry sense of humour. It's really solid satire. The way I would describe it is if George Orwell lived in the Rust Belt America and wrote 1984 from that perspective, and it's just a really nice, simple visual of the sunglasses, and it's one of those films that again has aged really, really well because it's got that kind of cynical pointing at the situation that we create. Like, the best horror is a reflection of primal fears, and one of them is that we're not necessarily the captains of our destiny, and They Live plays on that really, really well. And again, it's Roddy Piper brings out such a kind of bumbling warmth to it, and again, it's Keith David as well, isn't it?
Yes, Keith David is back. Yeah. Oh, it's so great, man. Yeah, Roddy Piper. I really love Roddy Piper in there. I know I was talking to Sarah about this the other day, and I think we mentioned that, wouldn't it be great if Kurt was back for this one? But of course, it just wouldn't happen. This was the point where he'd gone back to low-budget movies. I think he made They Live and Prince of Darkness for like $3 million for live films, so independent movies again. But Roddy's great. I mean, he's an optimist, isn't he? He still believes in America. He will follow the rules, but there are no jobs. So he joins this community, this homeless community, and they're grabbing whatever work's going. But you get this, like you said, Orwellian vision of LA with the Big Brother helicopters, and TV is dominated by these idiots, and the street preacher is warning about the rich controlling everything. It's such a great film, and a really funny film as well. And it's got Buck Flower, the old guy that pops up in almost every Carpenter film from this time. It's like everybody popping up to say their catchphrase. Yeah, They Live, I think, is very much like The Thing. It's crossed. It was a relatively small sort of cultish film at the time, but it's now something that people respond to maybe more than ever before. Yeah, well, we may come back to They Live later on at some point. What's your number 8, Matt?
Christine. Because there's a real Americana earnestness about what is really a relatively surface level reading of the book. And one of the things that I enjoyed that Carpenter brings out is there's a real element of the writer S.E. Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders. And there's quite a strong element of that in the book, and Carpenter brings that out, and like it's really allied to some lovely performances, and also as well as Carpenter doesn't forget to make you uncomfortable, and there's some like really disturbing imagery, like where Christine's on fire and she's chasing down that guy along the back road, and he's running, and like he's out. Keith Gordon gives such a good performance in it. The central forbidden romance between his best friend and Arnie's girl it's got like a real kind of broken, like painful earnestness to it, and it's a really, really well done, quite polished, adaptation of a book that I have a tremendous amount of affection for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, because he does take out. I haven't read the book for a while, but he does remove some of the horror stuff. Like there's the corpse in the book, isn't there? Like the kind of the corpse doing a commentary in effect.
Yeah, it's the idea is that in the book is that the car is possessed by the owner.
Yes.
Whereas in the film, it's more that the car is just essentially bad.
Yeah, from the assembly line, she's born bad, isn't she? She's in that very first scene. Yeah, that's interesting. It is great. I mean, like you said, Arnie Cunningham in the film as played by Keith Gordon, because I don't remember the book massively well, but he's really heartbreaking. He makes that transition into an arrogant bastard, kind of cackling madman by the end really well. But the first hour, a bit like Carrie, really, is so painful in this kind of high school food chain where he likes Christine because he thinks it's the only thing that he's ever seen that's uglier than him. He has such a low opinion of himself, and at home he's angry with his parents, and I suppose unlike Carrie, at least he has the loyal. Is it Dennis, his friend?
Yeah, Dennis.
John Stockwell. Yeah, who's again a really good character and a really nicely understated role in that movie. Yeah, I think Christine probably deserves more credit than it's ever had. It's great mechanical effects too, isn't it?
It's one of those films they'll probably remake and miss the point.
Yeah.
Like the car will have a catchphrase and turn into like a demon at the end, like a Tenacious D 80s heavy metal video. Done ironically, because that's how it works now, because everything's got to be done at the level of a caffeinated 15-year-old.
Yeah. And this movie isn't, is it? This movie takes its time, and it needs to, because it's all about him. And it's very much driven by Keith Gordon, who's a really great actor. Do you ever watch some of the films he directed? He directed Midnight Clear is a really good war movie.
Yeah, he was really, really competent director as well.
That's cool. It's got another great Carpenter score. I think the score from Christine is fabulous. I went to see Carpenter in the days when we could go outside. I went to see him play at Manchester when he was doing the tour for his Lost Themes albums, because he carried on making music. He did the music for the newest Halloween, but he's doing his own albums called Lost Themes, which are essentially scores that never were, bits of music that sounds like they could have been from a Carpenter film, and they're all fabulous. And the whole evening was great. I mean, John Carpenter doesn't say much on stage, but he says enough, and he's like an old man dancing around his synths and everything in a fabulous groovy fashion. But I think it was the point where he played Christine, which I think was the last track he played at night, which was incredible in this massively packed auditorium at the Victoria Warehouse in Manchester. And I think I fell in love with the music to Christine more than ever before, hearing it live like that. Great choice, Matt. What's your next one in your top 10? What number are you at, by the way? I forgot.
We are now at 7.
Oh, I say. Okay.
Assault on Precinct 13.
Fabulous.
The reason being is it was one of the first action movies, and I class it as an action movie rather than a straight up horror, where you had two things. One, the way that the guns were suppressed was a really, really interesting and quite disturbing sound effect, and it was one of the first films that made me sort of appreciate the intricacy and subtlety of sound in a film, and also just the way that Carpenter deals with death. Like, it's almost like an incidental, brutal way that people just die. There's no melodrama, there's no big speeches, like they just drop like a puppet with its strings cut. The siege itself, like it's horribly random in who lives and who dies, and it's a template for a particular style of genre movie. I don't know if you've seen VFW.
Yes, in the veterans thing, in the veterans bar.
Stephen Langan, there's Richard Roundtree and Martin Cove, and it's a really, it felt like a tribute to Carpenter.
Yeah, it very much is. Yeah, VFW is fabulous.
Yeah.
Cool choice, man. Assault on Precinct 13, tremendous. And your number 6, man. It's a little bit of a diversion, because it was when he directed for Masters of Horror. Now, I was torn between this and Pro-Life. Pro-Life just like an EC Comics thing brought to life, but I thought Cigarette Burns was far more interesting because it goes into something that Carpenter does really, really well, which is, as I said, he does Lovecraft with the serial numbers filed off. And this manages to, in the first half, become a little bit of starts off as kind of a lurid
noir investigation, and then it becomes something increasingly more disturbing.
Yeah.
And it's a real poikithermic piece of art in that it raises the temperature up on you slowly, and by the time you're at the point where you really have to, you should have to suspend disbelief. It's established so well the world that is there, and he does it, within the Mouth of Madness in exactly the same way, just on a much bigger scale. But it's a really, really intense piece of television, and I thought I would include it because it's Carpenter.
That's great. Yeah, I like both of those. Have you seen the Masters of Horror episode, Sarah?
No, afraid not. I haven't heard of either of them.
Oh, well, they're both really. I think Matt's right. I mean, Cigarette Burns is a more interesting one. I mean, it's got Norman Reedus.
Really?
The star. So there you go. Off your track.
I'm off. Right, see you later. Bye.
I'm all about the lowest common denominator. It's Norman Reedus in a suit, looking slightly bedraggled and tired.
Okay.
That's he's that man. He is that man. It's a bit of a breakaway from the norm. He's like he's like a programmer, a movie programmer, and he traces these extreme cinema things. He finds one called The Absolute End of the World, and there's Udo Kier as the collector of stuff that's got this effectively. Well, it's a desiccated angel, isn't it, Matt? It's like had its wings severed for the movie. Yeah. And that created a curse around it. And this movie, like you said, it's a companion piece to In the Mouth of Madness because the movie allegedly in its only screening caused an outbreak of violence. So it's commentating on the age-old, life imitating art, do horror movies, do blah, blah, on people, but in a really good way. And it's got Udo Kier threading his own intestines through like a movie projector. So it's got this mad, extreme K&B gore stuff, but it's great.
Oh man, that sounds so good.
And it's 50 minutes long. It's terrific.
I've changed my top 5 already. I've not even seen the film, but it's number 1.
And then, as you mentioned it, and as we talked about The Thing so much, Pro-Life, which is the one he did for season 2, which has a this weird Thing homage with a kind of spider thing with a baby's head, is a Ron Perlman joint.
Nice.
And that's his kind of satire on conservative Bible Belt America, really, because Ron Perlman's like all about no abortion. His young daughter is pregnant, and Perlman and his pals kind of surround the clinic where she's staying at because he doesn't want the abortion to go ahead, even though she's basically spawning this hell demon thing from her obviously poisoned womb. But yeah, it's a bit more it's more playful and less kind of thoughtful than Cigarette Burns. A bit silly, and it is, it whacks you over the head with the message, even with a big speech at the end from Ron Perlman. After he's killed half the cast, he's still giving a big pro-life speech. But both are worth watching. And Cigarette Burns is, the more I've seen, I've not seen it for a couple of years, but I have seen it a few times. The more I watch it, I think it is that late period masterpiece in his career when he couldn't really get feature films made, but Masters of Horror gave a few, including Carpenter, the chance to have freedom to make an hour episode and do whatever they liked, more or less. It's a must watch. Nice. So that brings us in union to our top 5s, I believe. Yes. So, Sarah, now's your time to shine with your number 5.
My number 5. Well, as you might have already guessed, I have massive, massive gaps in my John Carpenter knowledge. There's a lot of films of his that I probably haven't seen, so my top 5 is probably quite predictable. It's probably ones that a lot of people know of, but this is one that Stephen told me about, and it's Body Bags.
Yay! Nice.
Little fun anthology little thing that I think is just it's just so much fun. And it has John Carpenter is the crazy mortuary guy who's pulling people apart and introducing all the stories. The stories are great. They're directed by John Carpenter, and the last one is by Toby Hooper, isn't it?
Yeah, the Mark Hamill one.
Yes, and it has some great people like Mark Hamill and Stacey Keach, and it also has a tiny little Sam Raimi cameo as a dead person. I think Greg Nicotero's in there walking a dog.
It's one of those cameos are us things, isn't it? It's really fun.
I think it's just loads and loads of fun. Even like from the beginning with John Carpenter with the chainsaw, like right at the beginning, it doesn't even work properly. You can't get it started. Yeah, really good fun. That's something that I really enjoyed.
It's lovely. I remember the big thing I remember about that is that he's going around the morgue and they've all got a story and he's making bad taste jokes about like their dead bodies with breast implants and things like that.
Yeah, drinking formaldehyde.
Why didn't he get a series? I mean, that would have been. I suppose it was after Tales from the Crypt, and they were after something similar that maybe didn't catch on.
The interesting thing is these days with, and I know what I was saying earlier about gatekeeping, but this is the wonderful thing about the internet is that you now have the tools at your fingertips to compete with what used to be studios and record labels and publishers. I'm a perfect example of that. There's far less steps between me and any potential reader, and the thing is those anthology shows, they're out there being made. There's a lot of radio serial stuff. One of the things that I really enjoy is a show called Critical Role, which is a group of voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons that I found via YouTube, and entertainment's changed so much. So that's the other side of it. And so John Carpenter could get a gig like that tomorrow, stick a Kickstarter up, get funding for it straight away. But, he's living his best life in terms of being able to pursue making music.
Yeah.
And know that he can get a film, with his name on pretty much anywhere now because of the love that comes from work that perhaps initially wasn't received that well, but grows a lot of affection as time goes on.
Entirely. Yeah. Which is great. As you said, he's living the dream. Yeah, but for sure, this would have been the era. There is that sense, isn't there? Like with George Romero as well, he spent the best part of a decade trying to get anything made and trying to get another zombie film made. And it wasn't until Resident Evil became a big hit as a movie and as a game that he actually got the ability to make Land of the Dead and then thus a few more. But otherwise, he was just kind of stuck in a limbo for a while and doing a couple of unhappy studio movies along the way. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a shame.
The lovely thing is, right as we speak right now, the next George Romero or John Carpenter is running around making a film in a graveyard with their mates on an iPhone.
Yeah,
and
that's just it.
That's really exciting. Going home, they can download it, edit it, put music on it, and distribute it. They don't have to sit there and pitch and go, well, we were thinking Winona Ryder for the lead, and can we have a beach volleyball scene? You don't have to do that anymore. It's the same with music and literature as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happens all the time, doesn't it? Host was a good movie this year, a good horror movie that was made in lockdown, using the restrictions of lockdown to its advantage and part of the plot, which was, I thought, a really effective version of something we've seen before. The kind of Skype chat, the haunted Skype chat, effectively, or Zoom chat, but done really well and done with some relevance to the here and now. So, yeah, absolutely. So, top fives, yeah, great choice, Sarah. I like Body Bags. I like the Haddonfield horror slasher thing at the start, and then the amusing one with the hair transplant that Stacey Keach gets from the Mad Doctor is David Warner, right?
Yeah.
Which is a great comment on male vanity, and Stacey Keach, I remember, plays it really well, so that's really cool. Cool. So top five, I had a bit of a strain with this, but in the end, I put In the Mouth of Madness at number 5 because I think it's great. It's possibly, if you don't count Cigarette Burns, in fact, it's definitely, if you don't count Cigarette Burns, its last great film. Came out in 1994. He did a few things after this, Village of the Damned remake, which is all right. It's not bad, but it is director for hire stuff. He was above the kind of routine material, the thing that didn't need to be remade, but it exists. But In the Mouth of Madness is a genuinely bold kind of thing. It came out the same year as Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It came out after Lucio Fulci's Cat in the Brain, these films that were playing with the idea of the director being part of the film or the story or the creator. Well, even The Last Action Hero. Yeah, The Fourth Wall. So before Scream, all these films, which I think are really interesting. Like, I think Last Action Hero is a really underrated film and always did. But this one has got what I think is Sam Neill's greatest performance. I always loved him as Damien in Omen 3, which doesn't get near enough credit. And he's great in this, and it's framed by him in an asylum with a great gag where he turns up at the asylum kicking and screaming. He's greeted by John Glover, who's the one person you don't want to see in charge of an asylum because he's totally bonkers himself in everything. And the Carpenters are literally playing on the stereo on the tannoy. We've only just begun. It's a great joke. His doctor is David Warner, so everything's screwed. And it's the end point of his Apocalypse trilogy, which started with The Thing, the brilliant Prince of Darkness in the middle. And this one, the whole world is at stake because this famous writer who outsells Stephen King, called Sutter Kane, his work has bled into our reality.
That's one of my career goals, Steve.
Sutter Kane. Yeah, really, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. I'll be nice about it, Just...
That would be refreshing if you could be. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great premise, isn't it? And it's one of Carpenter's very influenced by Howard Hawks, as we said, but also by Nigel Neal. And this spells it out. I mean, literally, they go to the town of Hobbs End, which is a Neal reference. Prince of Darkness unfolds at Neal University. It's a very it's Prince of Darkness is written by Martin Quatermass, which is Carpenter's pseudonym for that film. But this is just fabulous. In the Mouth of Madness, it does end effectively with the end of the world, with the great joke that the plague of insanity that was caused by the books of Sutter Kane now crosses over into the bigger picture because there's been a film made by John Carpenter. So the ending is Sam Neill laughing like a maniac in a movie theatre. So if this was John Carpenter's last film, it couldn't have been a more perfect one. It wasn't, but it's a pretty tremendous late period thing. Plus, Jürgen Prochnow as this kind of
Sutter Kane,
as Sutter Kane, this kind of godlike figure leading the Black Shadow, and all those spooky images like the old man, or is it an old woman on a bicycle on that endless highway that they're driving to Hobbs End, and the paintings that change every time you look at it. It's got all this detail and rubber monsters. So, yeah, In the Mouth of Madness. It's what it's all about. So, Matt, have we had your number 5? I've lost track.
Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. Marvellous.
I tend to equate some of the greatest horror with how much reluctance I have to watch it again. And this is one of them because so little of the horror is actually explained. What happens has that kind of cosmic, grotesque joke because the people who are going in there, they're essentially enthusiastic and well-meaning and curious, and they get through this vile gauntlet for no other reason than because they come across it. And it's disturbing, and it stays with you like long after you watch it, and just the way that it creates the whole idea of the greatest force of evil in the universe, essentially a bottle, looks like an evil lava lamp. It's done incredibly well.
Yes. The anti-god. Yeah, that visual's great, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's long been underrated, or perhaps has more appreciation now. And it is a mixture of that. It's very intense, but it does have a sense of humour. It's got a scene where Alice Cooper kills someone with a bike.
Yeah.
And the Tom and Jerry cartoon that's used as part of it. But it's really unusual, I suppose, of its time, especially because it's a dialogue-driven, really intelligent film, just based on his love of like quantum mechanics and everything. So it has a sort of a theatrical quality to it, in that it could well have been adapted to a play. And it's lovely that films like this, we can talk about them now from the perspective of having seen them when we were younger. And one of the nice things about my relationship with my son is that we can recommend films like this to each other as kind of like hey, this is really good. Tell me what you think, and vice versa. So, and it allows you to keep your finger on the pulse of the new stuff, but also share the real pedigree stuff. Yeah, absolutely. That's such a pleasure. Absolutely. And these little gems like Prince of Darkness, key to that, isn't it? when I rewatched this just the other week, actually, I thought, wow, I always remembered the great concept of video signals from the future, and now that kind of transmission that everybody shares as a dream or premonition, it kind of feels like a preview of the found footage horror thing, doesn't it? Now it's really eerie scenes of that figure in the doorway, the shot where you see just a tiny bit more each time they dream or each time they return to it. I always think maybe that's one of the great things.
Something that Mike Flanagan does really well with the two series he's got on Netflix is a lot of the ghosts, particularly in Hill House, are in the background.
Yes,
like it doesn't zoom in on them. More often than not, it is just your attention is initially drawn to the main performance in the centre, but then you'll just see somebody come across the background, and well, you won't, but your brain does. Just creates this kind of real sort of uncanny valley effect to it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like if you look at Halloween in the Fog, which of course I really love, but by the time you get to The Thing, and especially Prince of Darkness, the number of his kind of chair jumper jump scares, they're much reduced. I think there's only one in The Thing that's truly a contrived jump scare, and there's a very obvious one at the end of Prince of Darkness, which works really well, which is the fake
so great
jump scare.
Yeah, it really got me.
It's just so his movies have become more ideas driven than Halloween, which is fine because Halloween is great as what it is. But he's still retained a few of those, just spread out and perhaps more carefully placed to, like you said, really get you. In this case, at the very end, with that really eerie, ambiguous kind of fade out of Prince of Darkness. So that's quite cool. I think it's great. It was his last film with Donald Pleasence as well, and it's about as Donald Pleasence-y as it gets, isn't he? He's pretty much got the same lines as he does when he's chasing Michael Myers, which is
he just gives that. He always looked perpetually concerned.
Yes, haunted.
Like even when he was playing Blofeld in the Bond movies, who's essentially this criminal mastermind, he always looked incredibly anxious about his position.
Yes.
Like he was an intern who wandered in one day and eventually has risen to whatever position he's in. And he's like, am I really supposed to be here? Like the Peter principle.
Domination. Yeah. Donald Pleasence has loads of vulnerability as Dr. Loomis as well, doesn't he? There's a point, I think it's in the first Halloween, but maybe it's in Halloween 2, or maybe they're both, where the sheriff actually asks him, he said, well, I think you're just plain scared. And he admits that he is. Yeah, actually, I'm just frightened. So, and the series loses that as Loomis becomes a bit more batshit mad, and by Halloween 5, he's just hitting Michael Myers with a 2x4 for about 5 minutes. But
all.
yeah, I think I'm a couple of minutes away from that. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Prince of Darkness is a great kind of post-studio John Carpenter, where he went back to his low-budget roots and cranked out 2 really interesting films, like we said, with the homeless community, in this case, used as part of Evil's ultimate plan, which I always thought was such a great concept, using the worms and maggots and this forgotten bunch of people in Los Angeles that they ignore every day. Okay, so we are now at number 4. Sarah, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is kind of technically not necessarily a John Carpenter directed movie, but he did do the writing, I believe, and he obviously did the music, and it's Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Oh, yes.
I had to include it.
Brilliant. This is my favourite of all the Halloween sequels. Yes.
Same here. No other Halloweens feature on my list. This will always be my favourite one.
Why do you love it so much?
Because it is so different. Because it has the creepy, catchy tune to it and stuff that you just remember. It just has so much more different about it, and it is a standout film on its own. I don't quite understand how it's become kind of involved in the whole Halloween thing, but yeah, it needed to be done.
Well, the idea behind it's really fascinating, which is that he thought the Michael Myers story, quite rightly, was exhausted. He didn't really want to do Halloween 2, but did as a writer. And he was like, there's no more story here. We've blown him up. It's over for him. It's a bit boring now. And so he wanted to make the Halloween franchise into a anthology. So every year or every movie would be a different story revolving Halloween. And interestingly, he got Nigel Neal to write Halloween. Well, Nigel Neal originally wrote Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, as it was called. But the script evolved to the point where Neal was pissed off and forced him to take his name off. And it was heavily rewritten, although I think the basic idea, which is fabulous and which features in a few later films, of like television being used as like a kind of national seance to kill America's kids, which I think is just a hilarious idea.
Like that series Ghostwatch.
Yeah, exactly. Ghostwatch is massively influenced by the Stone Tape by Nigel Neal and by the concept behind Halloween 3. It's the same idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a very Nealish premise with a very John Carpenter stamp, as you said. But it's magnificently weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's got my favourite ever explanation for a bit of weird plot that I've ever heard, which is that the plot which involves using Halloween masks sold to America's children and a stone from Stonehenge somehow, and these androids, these robot workers. There's a point where they ask the evil toy maker about the Stonehenge, and he literally says, "Oh, you'll have no idea how we got that stone here." Yeah, but how? Which is brilliant, because all the way through you're thinking, what? You won't believe it. That's a great choice. And it's really gruesome. And what do you think of the ending of Halloween 3, which is one of my favourite things?
It's genuinely been a while since I've seen it. Now, I'll be completely honest here. I was the other side of that argument. Because I used to be quite purist about, like, Michael Myers. Like, to me, mostly because I was inured to the structure of the serial killer goes on until I say he goes on, which was fostered at the time by magazines like Fangoria.
Yeah, the cover stars.
Yeah, you know, they were rock stars for nerdy kids. You know, it was, and eventually, like, the writers and directors, and as you mentioned earlier, Steve, and the special effects artists. So, you know, I wax lyrical about Stan Winston and Rick Baker in the same way people would wax lyrical about Kurt Cobain and, you know, Morrissey and Tom Cruise. You know, those to me were the artists of their profession, and there was maybe like 5 people who knew who they were. But yeah, I was sort of quite purist about it. It's one I'll probably have to revisit now that I don't have that attachment to it. And also, I feel that the character is being examined in a really interesting way under the David Gordon Green one.
Yeah, that was a strong movie, I thought. Yeah. I liked the David Gordon Green movie. Yeah, absolutely. Halloween 3, great choice there, Sarah. It's one that I rewatched a lot in that same VHS era. And it was always my dad's favourite, and I think it still is, because and we always felt like we were the only 2 people that liked it, because everybody else was like, what's all this about then? It's not a Halloween film. Although cleverly, when Tom Atkins is put in one of those easily escapable situations where he's tied to a chair, he is watching Halloween, the original, on TV, isn't he? Which I thought was a nice touch too. In this universe, Halloween exists as a John Carpenter movie that the evil toy maker shows to somebody to keep them distracted while trying to kill the nation's children. And with the ending of Halloween 3, what's your take? As far as I'm concerned, Tom Atkins is too late. The big giveaway at 9 is going to happen. It's all over. But what do you reckon happens at the end?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of confusing. He does seem to have, like, got to it too late. But then the reveal... Isn't there a reveal that one of them's an android or something, or a robot? Oh yeah,
in a short space of time, his girlfriend was was changed into an android. Yeah. So she was sort of eventually part of it as well, which is another of those you won't believe how he did this, but moments which they get away with through sheer kind of gumption. But yeah, it's kind of mad, that one. I like Tom Atkins. He pops up in a lot of the John Carpenter films. He's kind of a bit of a stud in the John Carpenter films, because in The Fog he sleeps with Jamie Lee Curtis about 5 minutes after meeting her, and the same happens with the much younger star of Halloween 3. He's obviously irresistible, and I think it's the moustache.
It must, yes, definitely the moustache.
Yeah, I can only assume that. And he's great in later films. He goes grey quite quickly because he's grey in Maniac Cop, which is just a few years later, but still got that great presence on screen. Wonderful. So that was your number 4.
Number 4.
Thank you. My number 4 is Escape from New York, which is really rather good, isn't it? It's the one with the Donald Trump wall and Manhattan Island prison and a massive New York City crime rate that's led to this kind of dystopian 1997, I think it's set in.
Yep.
The distant future.
Yep.
Our worst fears have finally come to light.
I knew it. This is also the great movie where you realise that Donald Pleasance is now President of the United States, just at a time of great international tension. So you realise that that things are a little different, and Nancy Stevens from Halloween is part of the Liberation Front. I like this as a Donald Pleasance fan, because for much of this movie he's got kind of a lot of indignity going on, because he's like tied to a wall and he's forced to wear a bad blonde wig. But by the end, he's like firing machine guns and he's gone totally batshit mad, and he kills Isaac Hayes' character, the Duke, I think it is. But it's just a really fun film, Escape from New York. It's the first time I think he had a decent budget, and it's really well designed. There's a really cool New York skyline that I guess was used with miniatures and matte paintings. And of course, after working together on Elvis, where actually Kurt Russell's really good. I quite like the Elvis TV movie, which covers a portion of the guy's career. Kurt Russell gets his iconic role, his most iconic role, as far as I'm concerned, as good and interesting as MacReady is. This is just fabulous, isn't it? Using Clint Eastwood's voice and John Wayne's walk that way around, and going through the ruins of like Broadway and the rest of New York with an amazing cast. Lee Van Cleef and Isaac Hayes, Ernest Borgnine as the kind of chipper cabbie guy, Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, Tom Atkins makes an appearance.
Tom Atkins is in there. Yeah. It's like, let's round up the usual suspects. Yeah. It's brilliant.
It's really good. I love that film. I haven't seen it for a really long time, though. It's one of those ones that I saw a very long time ago, and it's like, I really must revisit that before this, and I never got a chance. But I do really love it. It's a great film.
It is. I think it really holds up. It's very cynical, so it's about as cynical as Carpenter got, and his love of anti-heroes, and the punchline of the movie, and the same happens in Escape from LA as well, where they essentially throw away the survival of the human race, is really good. And it's quite shocking at times. Like, the characters you kind of feel for, like Adrienne Barbeau's character is killed quite suddenly, and that's still quite shocking for a movie that's quite fun. Otherwise, it's for a pessimistic film, it's just quite bouncy. And I think it possibly has does it have the best of his scores? It's one of my favourite scores. It's got a great theme tune, and a great catchphrase that everybody says to him, which is "I thought you were dead," which I think is taken from some old John Wayne film. I can't remember which one, but yep.
Did that have quite a good reception when that first came out?
I think so. I think it was like I think it was a decent hit. It was still relatively low budget, so it was still made by AFCO Embassy, which is the independent company. But as far as I remember, Halloween was the benchmark for his box office success, and this did well enough to move him on to The Thing. So it must have made a bunch of money. Yeah. So I think we're up to your number 4, Matt.
Starman.
Oh, lovely. Okay, tell me about Starman.
Well, it's a big, gentle Americana fairy story. It's got this kind of Messiah twist to it. It's people don't realise John Carpenter directed a film in which Jeff Bridges got an Oscar for this. And it's also got a really lovely, because Karen Allen plays the leading lady.
Yeah.
And Like one of the things with Carpenter when he has women in his films is that they're a little bit complicated and intricate and a little bit bruised, but they're not sort of arm candy. They struggle and they're not necessarily just potent and looking pretty, nor are they monstrous. They're there's a lot of laughter and anguish in them, particularly with her in this. And it's one of those films that I think there would be an absolutely amazing sequel. Because obviously at the end, she's left with this kind of Messiah baby, essentially Superman inside her. And that would have been quite an interesting film to come back and visit what he would have been like, So born in the 80s, he probably would have been about our age.
Sure.
So it would have been quite interesting. Yeah, and it's just a lovely film, and I like the kind of science fiction earnestness of it. And yeah, it's quite a warm, happy little film.
It is. It's really optimistic, isn't it? Because it kind of shows humans as being ultimately decent. Like we are potentially at our best when things are at their worst. Yeah, I always thought it was lovely. You watched it recently for the first time, Sarah? Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think? Be honest.
I didn't like it quite as much as you guys did. Yeah, I thought, as I said to Stephen, it shows John Carpenter can turn his hand to most types of genre, I suppose. Yeah. But for me, it was too sickly sweet. It was too goody. It was too blah for me. I didn't like Jeff Bridges.
Oh,
I'm putting it out there. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I thought, there were a lot of movies around that kind of time that kind of did that kind of thing, not necessarily with the alien thing, but obviously, you had E.T., which is another movie I'm not a massive fan of, Flight of the Navigator, Short Circuit, that kind of stuff. I loved Short Circuit way more than I love Starman.
Interesting. Yeah, that is of that ilk, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's getting a remake, isn't it, apparently?
Oh, really?
Well, we're talking Short Circuit.
Are they still going to cast Fisher Stevens as an Indian?
I hope
that would be great.
Just for the reaction on Twitter, I think they should just to make 2 million people have a stroke at the same time. That kind of stroke. There's been an apocalyptic event. What happened? We cast Fisher Stevens in that role again. Oh no!
What have you done?
I'm quite disturbed by the. Oh man, yeah, I like Johnny Number 5. Those movies. Short Circuit 2, I remember being a bit flawed, but the first one's really lovely. And it's got Ali Sheedy. Ali Sheedy was just maybe the best thing about the 80s, apart from obviously all these films that we've mentioned.
So it didn't. Starman didn't quite do it for me the way it seems to for you guys.
I still think it's lovely. I get that it's not for everyone, of course. I quite like a lot of the culture clash comedy in it. I think Jeff's performance is physically a really good performance with his kind of body movements, and he's a bit like, I don't know, he's somewhere between a clueless foreigner and like a robot, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's a nice film. I don't think of it as being particularly sentimental. I think it's Carpenter, so I think it's not as slushy as E.T. I think it's quite low key with the romance, which, as you said, has a really nice sort of vulnerable, funny performance by Karen Allen, who was long underrated as well. Actually, I always thought she perhaps
Indiana Jones. She's wonderful.
She is great in that.
Yeah.
But I get it. Like men will watch romance movies if you stick a real hero in front of it.
Mm.
Like all superhero movies ultimately are romance movies.
Sure.
Because it's about men sort of giving something up and like having to turn away. Like, Batman is forever going to be single for a reason. There's something romantic about that. But it's it's definitely a romantic movie. To me, it's Carpenter doing Spielberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like particularly with the way like the big wide shots and the intimacy of the way that the lenses that he uses when he's shooting Jeff and Karen up close. Like there's a real different light to how he shoots those scenes. They're lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bad guys are similar to E.T.'s antagonists, aren't they?
Yeah,
Um,
faceless government. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And it's one of the least Carpenter-like movies, although I think
Yeah.
it does still have those kind of ominous point of view shots in there in the first section. But it does have a sweeping score and a quite lovely outlook, which almost nothing else he did had. So yeah, that's cool. Nice choice, Matt. We're at number 3, I do believe and declare. So, Sarah, what is your number 3?
My number 3 has been mentioned already. It's Christine. I've got that up there quite high because, yeah, I really love that film.
Yeah.
For the same reasons as Matt.
Nice. It is really good, isn't it? The bullies are so horrible. What is the main bully? The guy with the long hair, what's?
Buddy. Who's about 50.
Yeah.
At least.
He's the interesting thing is they tend to dial down the bullies in Stephen King's books, but they're always far worse in the books than they are in the films.
Yes.
Buddy and Christine's absolutely horrible.
He's not the nicest in the film, is he?
He's worse in the books, though.
Mm.
You know, it's quite interesting. Like in it, particularly in the first section when they're kids. Like Henry Bowers is far more frightening than Pennywise is.
Mm.
Yes, it's brutal, isn't it? They really is it the Book of Christine? It's much more unpleasant. The kind of violation of Christine. They shit in her and everything.
Yeah,
don't
they sort of defecate on the back seat and sugar in the gas tank and like puncturing it.
So it's a total rape.
It's structured in a way that even though it's done to a physical object that you actually fear, it's actually quite an unpleasant scene, and you really feel for Arnie because you know how much Arnie's put into it and how much the car means to him, even though ultimately it leads to his destruction.
Although it's still excruciating in the film, isn't it? That scene is like, because it's not a very violent or gory film, but that scene feels really brutal.
Yeah.
Even without the more extreme stuff. Yeah, Christine's really good.
It's a quintessentially an American film of an American novel, because in the UK we don't have the relationship with cars the way Americans do.
No.
It's just you just get a car if you drive, whereas in America it's this big rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you're going to write about it, you have to write it from an American perspective.
Yeah. I still think there's a good film to be made about an evil Ford Cortina.
Yeah. I'd go Mini.
Oh, Mini! Wow.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
So like the Mini grew like there was some kind of Lovecraftian thing in it. That merged like a pseudopod that just kind of like leapt out and ate people.
Have you seen Rubber, the movie with the evil
yes,
tire? Right.
Yeah.
There's a few, isn't there? There is one called Blood Car, I think, and yeah, there's a few. And there's The Car, which is, I've forgotten what kind of car that is, but the 70s movie where it is the devil as a car, because it won't even go into a churchyard. It just gets the Wiggins if it goes towards a church, which is fair enough.
And there's Death Proof as well, where the car is an instrument of death, and that's Death Proof is incredible.
Oh,
I love that film.
Yeah, I'm always frustrated when people slate it as being some kind of lesser Tarantino. I think it's fabulous. Some of
it's got everything in there. It's got all of his obsessions lined up in a nice little row, and it's visually stunning, and also the righteous kicking that Kurt Russell gets at the end is so well deserved, even though it's absolutely horrible.
It's like the ultimate final girl moment, isn't it? That final scene, like Slumber Party Massacre, but amped up to 11.
I mean, Zoe Bell's incredible at that.
She's great.
Yeah.
That whole kind of Vanishing Point tribute is fabulous. Oh, Death Proof is great. And of course, that's one of the great things, isn't it? Because Kurt Russell being in all these iconic 80s things for Carpenter, and he comes back through one of the big fans of that stuff, through Tarantino's work, and indeed Bone Tomahawk and other things as well. It's fabulous to see, actually. Stuntman Mike. That's his name. I was trying to think of his name. Wunderbar. Matt, you're number 3.
In the Mouth of Madness.
Nice.
Simply because it, again, as I've said before, this is one of the films I point to with my belief that he's done Lovecraft, along with Stuart Gordon, who's captured Lovecraft right, and I'll include, I'd say, Richard Stanley's Colour Out of Space in that, and also Mandy.
Mandy's fabulous, yeah.
Mandy, I think, has been quite Lovecraftian. In a sense of the cult and like the the demons on bikes. It captures that kind of sense of like how there's a sense of cosmic unfairness, and all you can do is kind of survive, but you lose your mind at the expense of your soul or something along those lines. But In the Mouth Madness does that really well, and also it's quite romantic as a writer to think that you could write a book that would drive people insane, because I bet the sales were good. He gets the movie deal incredibly quickly.
Well, that's a line in the movie, isn't it? Because they're really alarmed about it. They say, I've heard this book can drive people insane, and the publisher says, I hope so. The movie's out next month.
Yeah, exactly. Charles Heston plays the publisher, doesn't he?
He does, which is great. Yeah. That's a great choice. It's really funny. Have you seen In the Mouth of Madness, Sarah?
No, I haven't.
This is, I think, a must-watch, probably out of all of the ones we mentioned, because it is funny. If you like Sam Neill, I think especially you'll get a kick out of it, because he's hilarious and also quite troubling in it. That's a cracking film. It's also got the spooky old lady from Twin Peaks, Frances Bay, who still gives me the willies. Not in that way, obviously. That would be weird. So my number 3, which at some point would have been number 1, but is Assault on Precinct 13, which I just think is the perfect scaled down, intense B movie. It's very much influenced. In fact, I think he edits the film under the name John T. Chance, which is the writer of Rio Bravo. So it's very Howard Hawksy. It's very much like the setup of The Thing from Another World, the 50s version, and it's got a great feisty heroine in the spirit of the actress from The Thing from the 50s, who I can't remember the name of, embarrassingly. But it's really tense. It's also got this really chilling vision of the gang who are this, as we said earlier, I think, almost faceless bunch who hold the precinct under siege like the zombies from Night of the Living Dead. It feels like a very post-Romero horror film, really, but with this crime movie plot. And it has the scene that's still fun shocking, which is the little girl who gets shot at the ice cream van, which is really stark. It happens in broad daylight. Like you said, Matt, the killer in question, who's after the ice cream guy, has got a gun with a silencer on it. It's really, really disturbing. But the whole movie is dynamic. It's really well paced, and it doesn't quit, and it's very well cast too. So it's his second feature film, but the first with that very distinct style.
That it's interesting because a film I saw recently with Joaquin Phoenix, You Were Never Really Here.
Oh yeah.
It occupies that same sort of like stripped back to the barest possible choices to move the story forward. Like they deliver in a series of images with very little dialogue a real sense of what this guy has gone through and why it's made him so effective at what he does. And yeah, it's that kind of spare lean noir type of film. Drive is another one. Where it's just absolutely minimalist as possible without being deconstructionist. I can watch that stuff all day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really like You Were Never Really Here, which Lynn Ramsey's such a good director, which I always thought, as much as I love Joker, it would make a great double bill, but I always thought that one is perhaps the really, really, truly great future classic Joaquin Phoenix performance in that kind of role.
That scene where they're on the kitchen floor is just heartbreak.
Yeah, it's excruciating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tremendous. So that's number 3. So I think we're down to the last 2.
Yes, we are.
We go to Sarah for your number 2.
My number 2 is Escape from LA.
Oh, lovely. Nice.
And Watched it I watched it quite recently because we were, for the Bruce Campbell episode, we were going to mention Bruce Campbell's appearance in it, and I think we completely actually never even mentioned it at all in the whole podcast. But Escape from LA stuck in my mind more than Escape from New York because it's been so long since I've seen it. So it probably would have been Escape from New York and then Escape from LA. But because that's fresher in my mind, it's basically the same kind of story, isn't it? Snake gets coerced into saving another corrupt politician, or this was a doomsday device or something that was given to his daughter, who ran off with a guy who was.
It's one of those things that sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud.
Yeah, exactly. I can't quite.
But when you watch it, you just get into it.
It makes sense. Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So this time it's 2013, so even further forward in the future. Yeah. And LA's been cut off and is now an island, and it's full of prisoners and undesirables. And yeah, that's when the president's daughter runs off with one of the guys who's one of the prisoners over there with the doomsday device, and Snake gets poisoned, or so he thinks. He gets poisoned, or he's got some kind of bomb on him. No, he had the bomb on him in Escape from New York, wasn't it? LA is the poison.
Oh, it's great fun
to go and rescue her. And yeah, once again, it goes along the same lines as Escape from New York, doesn't it? Because one of the main girls that you think is going to help him gets killed off really, really quickly.
Yeah,
and then you have lovely Bruce's little cameo as the Surgeon General of Beverly Hills, which is brilliant. You almost wanted it to be a musical number as well, his appearance, didn't you?
With all his surgical failures.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. He was amazing. I still loved him in that, even though his face looks really weird and plasticky. It's still Bruce, and he was still fantastic. I think that's the main reason why it's my number 2. Not because it's John Carpenter, it's Bruce Campbell.
God damn it. It's got a great cast, though, hasn't it? Like, Steve Buscemi is the guy with the Match to the Stars.
Match to the Stars, Eddie.
I like the fact that he's still doing the celebrity tours, even though the entertainment industry is completely dead, you know? There's nobody left.
And Pam Grier.
Pam Grier is brilliant. She comes back for Carpenter in Ghosts of Mars. Yeah, she's great, before the old Jackie Brown comeback. Peter Fonda seems to show up as himself, like surfing down Wilshire Boulevard
that's cool.
With the CGI wave, which perhaps dates it a bit, but never really did look very good. I like the fact that it's kind of preempting political correctness, even because it's they're shipping off anyone guilty of moral crimes, aren't they?
Yeah.
So people that smoke, drink, have sex before marriage, eat red meat, use foul language, runaways, prostitutes. Transgenders, like Pam Grier is a transgender, isn't she? In that, like a carjacker. It's mental. They got a big budget for this. Again, astonishing, really. I don't think anybody went to see it except perhaps people like us, but it is kind of astonishing, and a fabulous cast, and kind of random as well. A lot of it seems like they were making it up as they went along, like the basketball scene at the. I've forgotten where the basketball scene is, but that's kind of astonishing. Perhaps a little dated, but it does have. I think Escape from LA has like my favourite ending of any Hollywood film of the 90s, which is where he basically tells them all to go fuck off and says, and he shuts down the world. Yeah,
he has his hologram. Which they mention right at the beginning, and you think to yourself, I'll remember that, and then you completely forget about it throughout the whole film until right at the end, and then you're like, yes!
It's just a totally flippant sign-off for that character. And
he should have done more.
They should, and they were, I think, at some stage. I'm sure there was talk of a third one, although this didn't do very well. And I think there was talk of a TV series at one stage, which, nobody really wants. But that final look straight at the camera when he lights up his fag and he sent the world back to the Stone Age, as he doesn't really care about, is a great send-off for him, I think. Yeah,
it's an awesome film.
It is. It's a great film. And the last union of that bunch, it's written by, as far as I remember, by Deborah Hill, Kurt Russell, and John Carpenter. So everyone came together for the last time, which is quite nice, actually. Great choice for number 2. What's your number 2, Matt?
The Thing.
Ah, The Thing. We may have mentioned The Thing, but
yeah, it was tough between what I chose for my number 1 and my second choice. It was a very, very close call. But yeah, all the points I made earlier, and just again, I think it was a film that was ahead of its time, and it's still being talked about and being bought and adapted and discussed and built upon.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I can't say more than that. I mean, just to give some others a chance, I excluded The Thing from my top 10, but otherwise I think it would have easily been number 1, to be honest with you.
Same.
Because there's nothing else, is there? There's some very good other else's, but there's nothing that has that repeat shock value or the incredible achievement of everything, really. So that's fair enough. My number 2 is one you've already mentioned, which is They Live, which I do think is one of the great films of the 80s. I think actually everything about it works. I always thought it was a bit scrappy. I never quite got it until maybe a few repeat viewings. I don't think I totally got it when I was 10 and watching it in 1988 or whatever year it was, because that's fair enough, because it's quite complicated in a way, but it is great. It picks up on stuff that was in his early films, like Assault on Precinct 13. It's got that great portrait of Reagan-era America, the billboards, all the stuff that's in it, the detail of the subliminal messages that are revealed. Although things are pretty grim even before they get hold of the glasses. They already have this zombie-like police force that are just infiltrating the homeless community all the time. I actually think Roddy McDowall's really good. I love the 5-minute fight scene, which is this ultimate kind of ode to male stubbornness. If Keith David just put the sunglasses on, it never would happen.
Yeah, for God's sake.
And instead, after an eternity,
like 5-10 minutes,
and all that happens is they both end up looking a bit sore and silly, and it's so well done and well directed and well played.
It's lovely because it's also a bonding moment as well.
Yes,
I suppose.
It cements the central relationship going forward, so it's this really lovely energy to it for the rest of the film.
It's a key turning point. Yeah, and they're tremendous in it, and everyone's great. I like Meg Foster in it as well. It does have, like Escape from LA and a few others, it does have this really flippant ending, so pretty much everybody dies. But Roddy Piper does shut off the signal, and it's got that throwaway bit with the alien shagging the guy at the end, and the jokes about Carpenter and Romero. So I think it's great. I think it's like The Thing. I think it only gets better on repeat viewings, really.
I really like the look of the aliens. They're cool.
That's really cool. Yeah,
they're really, really creepy.
Yeah, it's a great makeup job, isn't it?
And it's also quite a common trope in genre fiction, isn't it? Like the aliens amongst us, body snatchers. There's a lovely Stephen King short story in Nightmares and Dreamscapes called the 10 O'Clock People, which is about people who only see these aliens because they only smoke like a couple of times a day. Their nicotine levels are just enough to allow them to see these like bat-like aliens that feed on humans amongst us. So it's a really, really lovely play on a classic concept.
It is based on a short story, isn't it? They Live, I believe. I've got it written down on my notes. It was based on a short story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that rings a vague bell, but I really had forgotten. Yeah, that's cool. I'd like to track that down. Carpenter does kind of read interesting things. It's just a fascinating movie. You were less enamoured with it, Sarah, from what I remember.
Well, because that's another one that passed me by until very recently. I've heard so much about it, and I've seen the obey command, the subliminal message. I've seen the look of the aliens and stuff. So I was actually kind of expecting more than the film actually was, to be fair. I suppose if I'd have watched it when I was younger, I would have definitely had a bit more enthusiasm for it. But I kind of feel like I'd kind of seen it already, or seen what I thought I'd wanted to see by what I already knew about it. if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough.
I wasn't a fan of Roddy Piper either. If they'd have brought Kurt Russell in for that one, it would have been loads better, I reckon.
You should still give a chance to Roddy Piper's awesome Hell Comes to Frogtown. Now that's a good movie.
I'm sure I've seen a couple of other things that he's been in. Restless versus Zombies and stuff like that. You know, he's not particularly meant to be good and stuff like that. And I've always enjoyed him. He's a great guy, but yeah, I wasn't keen on him.
He's always done an entertaining film.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Jason Statham.
Oh, yeah, Jason Statham. Yeah, he's great. I was a big fan of the Crank movies.
Really?
Yeah.
I think they're mental. Yeah, I really like those.
Oh, the second one's even better than the first.
The second one is totally bonkers. Yeah, the second one, he puts his
I
foot
don't think
through
I've
the floor.
seen any of them, but I did like him. He was in Lock, Stock and stuff, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, I liked him in them.
And Death Race as well.
Yes, the remake of the Death Race 2000. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
I love that one because it's a real genre B movie that manages to attract Joan Allen and Ian McShane. You know, it's really, really
together at last.
Yeah.
Brilliant. There's a weird moment when Francis de la Tour, who I remember from British TV sitcoms from the 80s, turns up in the Book of Eli, the Denzel Washington film, with Michael Gambon, I think it is. They're a couple in the post-apocalyptic Mad Max future. That's all to do with the rewritten Bible. Yeah, that's mental to see that. That's just totally irrelevant, obviously, but bizarre. Good to know she's still alive, though. So, yeah, great choice. So, I think we're at number one.
Number one.
So, it's Sarah, you're number one.
Okay, this is like totally because it's like a massive nostalgia trip, and I recently watched it and just remembered how much I loved it. But my number one is Big Trouble in Little China.
Great. Why not?
Oh, it's so awesome. I remember, I'm sure I used to watch it loads when I was a kid, and I don't think I've seen it since I was a kid. And I managed to get hold of a copy of it very recently, and that was just so much fun. It's great. It's such a great film. It's got everything. It's got the great cheesy one-liners that you get from Escape from LA and stuff like that. And it's got some really cool monsters, which don't really appear till the end, do they? You don't think it's going to be too monstery, apart from the three thunder, lightning and rain or whatever.
Yeah. The three storms.
That's it, the three storms. I also had a bit of a crush on lightning. Just putting that out there.
Well, not Kurt Russell himself.
No.
Interesting.
No, that's the thing. I've never actually thought to myself, wow, he's really good looking. I've never really had that much of a crush on him. But he's such a good actor, though, and he plays the characters like Jack Burton really great. And I like Kim Cattrall as well. She's great.
She is actually really good in that, isn't she? Yeah.
And Victor Wong. There's Egg.
Yeah.
Someone called Egg. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great cut. It's really mental as well, isn't it? I don't think you'd get a blockbuster that was this mad these days. Everything plays it safe for a certain budget level, but this one is bonkers. Presumably they wanted an Indiana Jones kind of thing, but it's got all those disembodied heads and stuff, and like you said, the bug-eyed monsters,
the crazy like orangutan monster thing at the end.
And it's genuinely really good. The action scenes are really well done.
Yeah.
And I like that he's not afraid to be ridiculous. So he gets the ceiling falls on him, and he gets lipstick on him, all that stuff.
He gets knocked out while everyone else fights, and then wakes up when it's all over and done with.
That's it. And it's in the era of indestructible, Arnie type action heroes, isn't it? So I think that's why that warms to me even more, as much as I enjoy those. You do, yeah. There should have been more. Did you ever see the music video for the title track with John Carpenter and his band, which I think were called the Coup de Ville? That's slightly cringeworthy, but fun in a 80s-tastic kind of way.
Oh, cool. No, I haven't
Check
seen
it
it.
out.
I'm going to have to find that.
It's a catchy tune. That title song is very. Once you watch it or hear it, well, obviously you heard it on the film, but
Yeah.
you'll never get it out of your head.
Why would you want to?
Yeah.
You wouldn't. You'd have to have an exorcism to get rid of that. And John Carpenter as part of a band is just hilarious in itself. Mid-80s John. Oh, that's a great choice. I'd immediately want to rewatch that. Because it's just the best. Matt, your number one?
Halloween.
Halloween, yes.
It is, as I mentioned, it was one of the formative horror movies for me. The music, the cinematography, the performances, like it's the right amount of exploitation and titillation. It's got dumb, horny teenagers who you actually really like, and it's got that classic Puritan punishment of sin ethic, which Myers embodies. It also really plays with him just being in the background.
Yeah.
The simplicity of the mask, and also, to me, that last scene where he's pushed out of the window, you see him in one frame lying there. It cuts back to inside, and then it comes out again. He's gone. There's that moment of silence, and then those big chords kick in, and the main melody is such a powerful moment. And it was the first time I saw a film where I was like immediately like, "Oh my god, I hope they do another one."
Yeah.
And it's just so powerful, and I really, really enjoyed the David Gordon Green version because it understood what was good about Carpenter's original version. You sail through a lot of cringe if you watch mainstream horror. A lot of people follow characters like Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees and Leatherface in the same way people who read comic books follow superheroes, and the same way people who listen to music follow bands. Like I wouldn't say you identify, but you kind of almost have characters that appall or attract you for some reason. And Michael Myers is this kind of blank, but he's also slightly awkward, and the mask is simultaneously terrifying and a bit crap. It's not this ornate kind of thing that he spent a lot of time on. The problem is with a lot of serial killers is they're almost needlessly elaborate. When it's done well, as in Hannibal, like it's actually sort of part of their signature, but sometimes a lot of the serial killers are just needlessly florid. Whereas Halloween, Myers has this kind of ugliness to how he kills. Like with there's obviously far less deaths in Halloween than there is in a lot of modern slasher movies, but the intimacy with which they're filmed makes them more disturbing.
Yeah.
Because you care for these people as they die, and they're not dying because of anything wrong. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. They're great characters, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is unusual for that period, I suppose. There's occasionally good characters in early 80s slasher films, but Linda and Annie and obviously Laurie, and even the goofy boyfriend of Linda, but especially Annie's sarcasm. I love that.
Oh, I love the Linda and Bob bit when they're in bed. It's the best thing ever.
And he's a total tool, isn't she? And she's really quite funny. And it is quite sad when they die. You do want to spend more time with them. It's a shame they're not around for Halloween too. And then Small Town, the stuff with Donald Pleasance, I always really enjoyed.
Yeah.
His obsession.
That's a classic scenery chewing performance.
It is. Yeah, and that dialogue is very, very sinister. You can see why he went for it. He's talking about this ordinary guy being evil on two legs and the other one. So, it's great fun. And it was the kind of confirmation of the Carpenter style, really. I suppose not as many people saw Assault on Precinct 13, but it was all there. The use of the widescreen frame, like you said, the stuff that I didn't see until repeat viewings of where he is just on the other side of the frame and you're looking on stage right. It's got all the great moments, and she's great in it. She's really affecting in that movie.
And I think that, bringing her back, how David Gordon Green brings her back in the newest version is just lovely. Lovely in the sense of it's a really nuanced performance, and it allows her a chance to really show her range.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, because she is a really good actress and somewhat underrated. And I like the reversals in the new version. I like the reversal of her being the one that's fallen off the balcony and gets up and it cuts to the floor and she's gone, or Laurie being the one that's watching the teenage heroine from the classroom instead of Michael. Some nice twists. Yeah,
it was between that or Big Trouble in Little China, because
Yay!
For all exactly the same reasons, and it's just it's glorious on every level. It's got an Indiana Jones vibe to it. I love the kung fu sequences, and the bit that just sold me on the film was when you had the gangs coming together, and some of them had butcher cleavers. And you see James Hong turn up, and because you knew he was in Die Hard, so that movie nerd part of your brain immediately started going doom 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 doom. And then you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm really excited to find out. And that's the first you got the fight in the airport, and it's really painfully 1980s fashion wear at the time.
Yeah.
But it just adds to the charm, and I think there's a remake in development, and they'll miss the point.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
I love the kung fu sequences because they're pure Shaw Brothers wushu ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And it's a real sort of pulp, Flash Gordon-esque comic book energy to it as well.
Yeah.
The idea that you can just solve most problems with a bit of courage and a good right hook. But yeah, it's a wonderful movie. But in the end, I sort of had to go with my education through Maglin Video, and one of the earliest was Halloween. So
yeah, that's a good enough reason. Yeah, absolutely.
What's your number one?
Well, my number one is The Fog, which
I thought it would be.
It really had to be, and as much as I love Halloween, which would have fit into the top 5 if there was room, which there wasn't in the end. I may have watched Halloween maybe a few too many times, but The Fog, I always loved just as much as Halloween, and I think it is quite a bold move because it's bloodless. It's. I mean, they went back in, I think, post-production and added some extra jump scares, but it is a fairly quiet ghost story. I love The Fog for its atmosphere. It's got such a beautiful Southern California atmosphere, and it's all about storytelling. It's got one of my favourite horror scenes of all time, which is the very opening, which is where John Houseman just tells a ghost story over the campfire to a bunch of kids, and he's basically telling the plot. He is Basil Exposition in the first 5 minutes. Everything you need to know about The Fog is in John Houseman's opening story. But it sets up a film that's all about storytelling. Throughout The Fog, different people basically tell a story to someone else. Everybody's got a story to tell. Even Jamie Lee Curtis, who is great, and she's playing the polar opposite of Laurie. She's this kind of liberated, fun, lively girl that meets Tom Atkins, and obviously, like all of us, immediately wants to sleep with him.
Yeah.
Even she and Tom Atkins talk about their own ghostly experiences of hitchhiking, and he talks about his dad's experiences as a fisherman. So it's full of these really spooky dialogue moments that you wouldn't normally find in a horror film. Halloween has some of those moments too, but The Fog, I think, really nails it. And I just always thought it was really scary. I think we talked about it in the Halloween, top 10 shit your pants moments. But the scene with the nice old babysitter and the fog creeping under the door was one of the great scarring things from horror movies that I remember from growing up, and part of the reason this film is so lodged in there. But the whole thing I think, really holds up. it's got one of those great Carpenter finales, which, like a few of his others, not The Thing, I don't think as much, but quite a few of his films, like Prince of Darkness, have climaxes where it's cutting between different groups of characters in a different part of a confined space. And this does it over 2 locations, I think, because some are in the church. Adrienne Barbeau is in the lighthouse, which is such a great location for a horror film, and has been for much equally interesting films ever since, of course. But the cross-cutting at the end as the ghosts appear at these different locations is fabulously done. So yeah, I think it's great. It also has maybe the best tribute to The Thing from Another World, which is Adrienne Barbeau's final speech, where she, instead of keep watching the skies, which is the famous closing words of The Thing from the 50s, she basically says, keep looking for the fog to the ships at sea who can hear her voice. So for lots of reasons, including those, that one is my favourite, I think. Yeah, just love it. And it had, possibly even worse than Carrie 2013. It had this total, I'm not going to go on about it because it's this total bag of shite remake with Selma Blair, which
they always feel, and they always feel like music video versions of the original film, but somehow stretched to feature length.
Yes, it's strange, isn't it?
One of the few films from that era that I think stands out is, did you ever see Disturbing Behaviour?
Oh yeah, that's quite an interesting sort of, I remember that as a kind of, is that like a Body Snatchers-ish thing?
Yeah, like, where sort of they move, and it's kind of like Stepford Wives, but with the kids.
Stepford Wives, yeah.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting.
It's a lovely film, The Fog.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It does have that great widescreen look. All of his trademarks are there. The beautiful synth score, which is again one of my favourites. I also just like the DJ character played by Adrienne Barbeau, who I think is maybe one of the best voices in 80s horror. Yeah. She's almost like a Greek chorus all the way through, and I like the fact that she's peddling a line of quite nice smut on the air as well. Keep me turned on for a while and I'll do the same for you. There's a lot of that going on, which you don't get much with Bruno Brooks back in the 80s, unfortunately. Dated cultural reference alert. But yeah, The Fog is tip top, and it holds up. I've watched it recently-ish, and yeah, I don't think you can beat that, apart from The Thing. So we have covered most of them. I mean, it's worth maybe a cursory glance at the rest of his stuff. I mean, we have covered between us, I think, nearly everything. So, any fans of Dark Star, his feature debut?
Oh, that's another one I haven't seen.
Fair enough.
It felt a little bit like too much of a stoner parody of 2001.
Which is what it is, essentially. Yeah.
Oh.
It felt like a student movie. The fact that I think Dan Bannon cut 70 minutes from it for a director's cut, something ridiculous like that. Another one that I have a bizarre affection for because it's based on a really good book is Vampires.
Yes, I like that a lot. Yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. I like the kind of attention to detail with how they go about the possibility of humans facing down vampires. Like, from a right point of view, it's very satisfying that he sat there and figured out how it would work, or not, as the case may be, because is it Thomas Ian Church who plays the main vampire?
Oh, it's Thomas Ian
Griffith.
Yeah, Alec. Yeah,
personality of chair, but
he was good as that though. I liked him. Yeah,
he was sort of like camp, almost as if he was in a different movie.
Yeah.
I kind of wished that he'd have gone a little bit more near dark with it.
Right.
Sure.
But yeah, it's an enjoyable move, sort of like entertaining B movie, and the sequel had John Bon Jovi as vampire killing priest. Which,
oh good God. Yeah,
you probably didn't know you needed to see that, but
no, I definitely will not be watching that. Jeez. I think occasionally, I think it was a little bit miscast. Vampires was because I didn't like James Woods. Once again, if they'd brought Kurt Russell back, I'm just going to
I love James Woods.
No, he was rubbish. But I did love Daniel Baldwin and Cheryl Lee. They were amazing. I thought Cheryl Lee was brilliant as Katrina.
Oh, because she's chained to like a bed for ages, isn't she? But she then transforms. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah,
she's really
great.
I never thought she got a role as great as Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, but this is maybe as close as she got. Because it is another kind of schizo role, isn't it?
I loved the story between those two as well. But James Woods, nah.
Oh, you see, that's fair enough. I do. See, I think he's one of my favourite things.
It would work with Kurt Russell, though.
No, I suppose it'd be a little bit too badass for it, I suppose.
I have to like it.
James Woods has got that great speech there where he talks about vampires in movies and says, actually, they don't turn into bats. They're not a bunch of, to quote him, fags, unquote, hopping around and cheesy Eurotrash accents and stuff. I think he's funny. I think he's a total bastard and he's absolutely foul and awful, which is, I guess, another of his Carpenter's anti-heroes, but very funny with it. Daniel Baldwin, he doesn't turn up in much these days.
No.
I hope he's all right. He's a horrible person in that too, isn't he? He's a total thug bastard.
Yeah, he starts off like that, but towards the end, it's quite sweet.
Yeah.
It looks like he's drunk most of the movie.
I think all the Baldwins kind of do that, though, don't they?
It's like a family trait.
It is, yeah.
Which one is in...
Their blood is like 20% proof.
Yeah, I think it is.
Which is the shark movie, which has got insert Baldwin here and the sister of Scarlett Johansson. Is it Shark in Venice?
Oh, I don't know. Let me look that up.
Because that Baldwin, is that Stephen Baldwin in that one?
Oh,
he's the one you fall
him.
if you can't get.
He's my favourite.
Yeah, he does pop up in some interesting
Baldwin
stuff.
Yes, I quite liked him.
Shark in Venice. Yeah, that's your must see Baldwin film for the weekend. Vampires, it's fun. I really liked of the other stuff. Someone's Watching Me is a really good tight thriller TV movie, late 70s, which is interesting, I think, as a precursor to Halloween because it's using quite a lot of the same tricks and tactics, faces hidden in shadows and all that kind of stuff. Influenced by Rear Window and Hitchcock, but a really good straightforward thriller with Adrienne Barbeau. The nice thing about her role in Someone's Watching Me, I think, is that she's a lesbian character that is unpatronisingly portrayed. There's no issue made of the fact that it's a rare gay character in a 1970s American TV network movie. But although she's killed, she comes across as quite a fully fledged character rather than just another one for the body count. So I quite liked that when I went back to watch it. I'd forgotten about that. But it's a cool movie. Have you seen Someone's Watching Me, guys?
No.
I mean, it's kind of the beginnings of everything, really. Like Charles Cyphers, who's the sheriff in Halloween, he's there. Adrienne Barbeau is obviously there. It's cool. It's worth watching. Elvis was the Kurt Russell Elvis, which is fun from what I remember. I haven't seen it for a long time. Memoirs of an Invisible Man is an interesting one.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I thought I hadn't seen. I was like, it doesn't ring a bell. And then as soon as I put it on, I went, oh yeah, I remember this. It's just one of those kind of classic Chevy Chase things done in the same era when he was pretty much everywhere, really, isn't it?
It's a bit of a mustard burp of a film. Like, it's tangy and memorable when you first see it, but then it smooths out and you've forgotten it.
Yeah, no, I had completely forgotten it until I stuck it on and went, oh yeah, I have seen this, but yeah, it doesn't stick in your brain. It's all right.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a weird halfway house. Like, from what I have read, Chevy Chase wanted to do something that was different to his usual shtick. He liked John Carpenter, so he campaigned for Carpenter to direct it, but the studio wanted more of Chevy Chase's shtick. So,
Yeah, I was going to say, it didn't seem that different from his usual stuff to me.
I think that's it. Yeah. It's got some really cool moments. Like, it's got moments where you think, that's the film that might have been. Like, there's a weird sexual nightmare where Daryl Hannah's trying to seduce him, and he undresses and he looks down and his crotch is missing. It's got moments like that in a family fun special effects flick. And at the time, special effects were pretty kind of hot off the press. And it was originally, I think, conceived as a story about how lonely it is to be an invisible man in a modern city. And instead it became this kind of man on the run thing that was somewhere between Hitchcock and a big blockbuster. So yeah, I think it's an interesting failure, that one. It does have Sam Neill.
Yes, he's good.
Yeah, because Sam Neill's out there, and he's a bad guy, and I love Sam Neill as a bad guy because he's out there like threatening to cut people's balls off and frying them for lunch. So yeah, Village of the Damned, which was a Carpenter remake with Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley, of all people, which is all right. I mean, it's just a kind of functional remake of a really good 60s film and a great book by John Wyndham, The Midwich Cuckoos. Any thoughts on Village of the Damned?
I think it's one that I have seen, but not for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, it's relatively forgettable, I would say. I mean, it's one of those kind of director for hire gigs. And we mustn't leave, of course, without mentioning the mighty, the unique, the marvellous, well, not so much, Ghosts of Mars.
Oh, no.
Oh,
with Jason Statham.
I was really hoping we wouldn't have to talk about Ghosts. Why?
Well, look at the cast. It's got an all-star cast of classic actors: Natasha Henstridge,
Ice Cube.
Stephen, we've spent a lot of time like curating why John Carpenter's a wonderful filmmaker. Why would you hand the silver bullet to the listener and kill that nascent love we've inspired in these people?
It's all over, isn't it? Despite Ice Cube and Pam Grier.
Oh God, no! Just stop it. Ice Cube was good in Boys in the Hood, right? That's the only film he's been good in. Like everything else, he just plays Ice Cube.
Hang on a minute, I put it to you, Anaconda.
Oh, amazing film.
Which I thought was
You're always putting your Anaconda everywhere.
Hey, that's just a rumour.
You're just wrong. No, just... Oh, no.
It is a bit rubbish, I'll give you that. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, actually. Although, I don't think, from memory, there was that spate of really big budget Mars movies in the late 90s. I don't think any of them were any good, were they? Because there was the De Palma one, Mission to Mars, Red Planet. Yeah. They were all a bit rubbish.
So far, the only good film about Mars has been The Martian.
Oh, that's lovely, yeah. Matt Damon's so good in that. Yeah, lovely film, actually. I forgot about The Martian. Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, Ghosts of Mars never existed. And the final thing, I think, because he now spends his time watching wrestling and making new music and getting the check for all the Halloween sequels and remakes, thank you very much, is The Ward from 2010, which is his last feature film as director, actually. Anyone seen The Ward?
No, I haven't.
No, it's another one I haven't seen, I'm afraid. It's got Amber Heard in it. Sorry, I'm literally just looking up.
Yeah, Amber Heard, who,
Who
indeed.
we don't talk about.
No, we don't. No. Isn't she into some weird stuff?
Apparently so.
Yeah. I don't like Johnny Depp's a creepy man. Anyway, except in Nightmare on Elm Street, where he's very shaggable. The Ward got a cinema release. I know because I was the only person at it in the UK. It's a weird thing. It came out after, I'm pretty sure it came after Shutter Island, and it's in that category of things influenced by, like, Sam Fuller's Shot Corridor from the 60s, it's dash of Session 9, I guess, a dash of the Elm Street movie where it's a bunch of psychiatric patients being picked off, in that case by Freddy. But unfortunately it's kind of weighed down by this very sort of dated seeming, even in 2010 it felt dated, J-horror-ish ghost plot with a kind of M. Night Shyamalan big montage final twist. Which of course even by 2010 we had about 5 of those a week. So again, it seems a bit wasted. I mean, there's no Ice Cube, unfortunately, who would have elevated it above the average. And it does have some of those Carpenter-ish prowling corridor shots and tracking shots. But yeah, it's a bit kind of ho hum. Anyone could have made it, essentially.
I was going to say, by the looks of the cast and stuff, it's like mainly female cast as the main characters. Yeah,
it's a weird film. Like, I think it says a lot, because John Carpenter movies are normally not at all interested in sex and things like that, because it's got an all-female cast, and it even has like a communal shower sequence where you don't see anything. So there's something almost... Whereas Paul Verhoeven would have been up their bottoms, not literally, hopefully. In this, it's very chaste, so maybe that says a lot about his unwillingness to go there. But yeah, it's a bit kind of TV movie bland. So a shame that maybe that will end up being his last film as a feature director. But of course, we have fond memories of everything else.
Yeah.
Lovely. I think that's probably the whole career covered, except for like some stuff he wrote and whatnot. But any final words on John Carpenter, guys, before we head off into the Panaglide night?
I would like to see him do another film, but he's clearly, loving what he's doing at the moment, which is, touring and was touring, and making music, and also, sitting on royalties from, the new very successful versions of the films he pioneered.
Yeah. Isn't it great? Like, I think it might have been the Fog remake or even the Zombie Halloween, but they interview him occasionally and ask the question, what do you think about this remake of the Fog? And he usually responds with something like, I absolutely love it. It's a brilliant movie. Haven't seen it, but it's brilliant. I saw the check.
Yeah. Or he was once asked what he did as an executive producer. He said, I turn up on the set, I say hello, then I go home.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And it sums up, because the guy's always been really unpretentious about movies that, of course, have been studied to the nth degree, especially The Thing, and that's fair enough. But ultimately, he just likes monster movies and containment movies and things about men in a small space, and does them really well. Fabulous. Well, there you go, John Carpenter. I'm sure will pop up in another episode in the future in some way or another. Perhaps when we do our Masters of Horror episode, Sarah, which we'll send your way. And that's about it, actually. I mean, just before we do go, we need to tell you that our last episode of the year goes live on December the 25th. Pretty unexceptional day. I'm sure you'll have loads of time to listen to it on the day. Not much else going on.
Nope.
And, of course, we have a real treat, assuming we survive that long. In perfect company with the festive season, which is coming, along with everybody else, we'll be discussing the classic Silent Night, Deadly Night, and its immediate companion piece, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. Not the other three, because we don't need to. So you get to hear Sarah repeatedly shout, "It's garbage day!" for no reason whatsoever, other than that she's just watched Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. And I'll be talking a lot about Linnea Quigley's really pointy antlers. So, that's coming next time. We'll also be counting down the favourite horror movies that we have of 2020, which unfortunately means, yet again, I'll be saying things like, this is the best year for horror I can remember, which I said last year.
And the year before that. And then every film will be the best horror film you've seen that year.
Yeah, this is really the ultimate. I mean, this is the best. Actually, this is the greatest performance I've seen since the last one. Yeah, so get your bingo cards out, which we'll be supplying to print out, and you can tick off all the same old shit you hear every year. But obviously, stay safe, don't lick anyone. The usual kind of government warnings apply. Although the licking thing, I think that's a bit oversold. Anyway, Matt, I guess it's good night to yourself. Up to anything in the upcoming month?
Well, I have my books available on Amazon, both in paperback and ebook. My website, www.mbblizzard.com, has links to my mailing list, my books, short fiction. I'm also gearing up to release a series of novellas next year, which have a kind of Big Trouble in Little China vibe meets Lord of the Rings vibe to them. So
very nice. Well, Matt will be joining. Thanks, Matt. Matt will be joining us in a future episode, of course. Always good to have you back, sir.
Thank you.
And no, very welcome. Thank you for coming on. And Sarah, you're obviously going to be having some alone time with the 76 disc edition of Dawn of the Dead. Anything else planned apart from obviously a bit of a cuddle with that?
No, I'll see what comes along. We'll be looking for new series to watch. I should really start Bly Manor at some point.
Bly Manor, yes.
Yeah. And I'll get my thinking cap on for the end of year movies, because it's been a very difficult year to get out and see anything. So I'm kind of unsure how my list will turn out. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And suppose generally trying to get into the Christmas spirit.
Yes.
Yep. Get our baubles out. Not that we don't do that all year round, of course.
Oh, they're already out.
I wonder what that was. I could hear it. Crumbs. Well, yeah, thanks, guys. That's it was good fun. But yeah, until the all singing, all dancing Christmas edition next month, thanks for joining us, and it's good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.